The morning of my wedding, I woke up to a text from my future mother-in-law. "We've taken your dress, the venue is canceled, and your fiancé knows what's best." I was shaking as I called him, but when I arrived at the ceremony, it was them who were in for a big surprise. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. My future mother-in-law, Martha, never really liked me. She acted friendly when my fiancé David was around, but when we were alone, she made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for him. She always questioned my wedding plans. She hated my dress, wanted a different venue, and tried to push her ideas. When I didn't agree, she pouted like a child. At the time, I thought she was just an overbearing mom. But now I see it differently. I thought David was on my side. I thought he had my back, but I was about to find out I was wrong. I woke up feeling excited and ready for the big day, the one I had been planning for months, the day I was supposed to marry the man I loved. Then, my phone beeped. It was Martha. "We've taken your dress, the venue is canceled, and your fiancé knows what's best. Don't make a scene, just accept it." At first, I thought I was dreaming. I had to read the message a few times before it sank in. My heart raced as I called David, straight to voicemail. I called my maid of honor, Sarah. No answer. I called the venue, and the woman hesitated before telling me. "Oh yes, David called this morning and canceled everything. I'm so sorry." My hands were shaking. This couldn't be real. I rushed to my closet. My dress, my shoes, and veil were all gone. Panic set in. They had planned this. They waited until the last moment to do this, thinking I would be too shocked to fight back. They were wrong. I grabbed the first clothes I could find and jumped in my car. If my dress was gone, someone had to have it. I thought about going to David's house, but instead, I drove straight to Martha's. When she opened the door, I saw it in her eyes, smug satisfaction. She didn't pretend to be surprised. She just sighed, leaning against the door like I was an inconvenience. "You need to calm down," she said. "Calm down? You took my dress, canceled my wedding, and now you're telling me to calm down. Where is my dress?" I demanded. Martha didn't blink. "It's gone. You won't need it anyway. The wedding's off." I felt my blood boil. "You don't have the power to cancel my wedding. David made the call. He's doing what's best for you," she said with a smirk. I took a deep breath. "Where is he?" "Busy." I didn't scream. I didn't break anything, but I knew I wasn't going to get anything from her, so I left. But I wasn't done. Not even close. If Martha had done this, she had done something worse. I had to find out what. So I drove to the venue. Cars were pulling in, guests were arriving, and everything was set up just as I had planned. Because the wedding wasn't canceled, it just wasn't my wedding anymore. I got out of my car and walked inside. Nobody stopped me. People I knew smiled at me, unaware. I reached the entrance and stepped inside, and there she was, Rachel, in my wedding dress. The sight made my blood run cold. Rachel had been my friend, but I'd ignored the signs. She was always close to David, and I had been too naive to see what was happening. Now she was standing at the altar, wearing my dress, with my fiancé, like I had never existed. The betrayal hit me hard. David looked calm, like nothing was wrong. That's when it hit me. This wasn't last minute. This was all planned. David let me spend months planning this wedding. He let me spend thousands of dollars sending out invites while he was planning to marry someone else. He wanted me to wake up, find out my wedding was canceled, and disappear from his life like I never mattered. They thought I'd accept it. They thought I'd walk away. They had no idea who they were dealing with. I stood there frozen. Guests were laughing and chatting, unaware of what was really happening. Martha was smiling, proud of her perfect plan. Rachel was glowing, wearing my veil. David wasn't guilty. He wasn't looking for me because he knew what was going on. Something inside me snapped. I didn't cry. Instead, a calmness washed over me. They had taken everything, my dress, my venue, my fiancé, my wedding. But I wasn't gone yet. I straightened up and kept walking. People noticed me, whispers started, but no one stopped me until I reached the front row. Martha's eyes locked onto mine, and I saw fear in them. She stepped in front of me, trying to block me. "You need to leave," she hissed. I smiled. "I think I'll stay." The whispers grew louder. I saw my cousin Rebecca, her eyes wide. Then I saw Sarah, my maid of honor. She looked guilty. That hurt the most. She opened her mouth, but I wasn't in the mood for excuses. I turned back to Martha, who was still trying to act like she had control. You weren't invited, she said with a forced smile. I laughed. Really? Because last time I checked, this was my wedding. David turned and looked at me, his face blank, but his eyes full of panic. Rachel went pale. People were definitely watching now. David stepped forward, his voice calm, but practiced. Let's not do this here. I tilted my head. Oh, but you wanted to do this here, didn't you? I gestured around the venue. Since you planned this behind my back. Rachel tried to stop him, but I cut her off. You didn't steal my fiancé, didn't wear my dress, didn't let me plan my own wedding while you waited to take my place. Her mouth opened and closed. I turned back to David. How long? I asked. He didn't answer. How long have you been planning this? Still nothing. Rachel fidgeted. It just happened, she said. I laughed sharply. It just happened. So you tripped and fell into my wedding dress, into my fiancé's bed. Martha sighed. Stop making a scene. I snapped my head toward her. You planned this, didn't you? She didn't deny it. I nodded, a cold feeling spreading inside me. I was ready to be the bigger person, to marry your son and put up with you. But now, I'm going to destroy you. She flinched. Good. David finally spoke, his voice too calm. It's over. Let's just move on. Move on. I felt something snap inside me. All right, I said, pulling out my phone. Let's tell everyone what's really going on. I hit play. Martha's voice blasted through the speakers. We've taken your dress, the venue is canceled, and your fiancé knows what's best. Gasps filled the room. Then David's voice. Babe, I'm sorry, but my mom is right. You're just not good enough. Rachel is better suited for me. The room went silent. You could hear a glass shatter. Rachel stepped away from David, horrified. Martha's face went white, and David looked like he was going to throw up. I let the silence settle before leaning in and looking Rachel straight in the eye. Still want him. She bolted. Martha turned to David. You told her that? David was frozen, like he couldn't believe how badly this was going. I pulled out another paper. You know what else I have? I said, unfolding it. The wedding bill. Martha's eyes widened. What? David and I signed financial agreements before the wedding. He owes me for everything, I said. $35,000. I read from the paper. David's face drained of color. That's not. It's in writing, signed, legal. I smiled. And if you don't pay? I leaned in. Well, you know I love a good public scandal. Martha looked like she might faint. David stammered, You can't. Oh, I can. I turned to the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the show because it's not over yet. David looked trapped. Martha was opening and closing her mouth, but no sound came out. The guests were shocked, and some were recording everything. Rachel was gone, thank goodness, but Sarah, my so-called best friend, was still standing there, frozen with guilt. I wasn't done. David had taken everything from me. His mother made sure of it. They wanted me too embarrassed to fight back, but they had underestimated me. Now I was going to ruin them. Just as Martha was about to speak, probably with some excuse, the door opened. A man in a sharp suit walked in, briefcase in hand. Apologies for the interruption, he said loud enough for everyone to hear. David's face went pale because this was my lawyer. Miss, my lawyer nodded at me. Everything is in order. I smiled. Perfect timing. Martha grabbed David's arm like she was holding him up, afraid he would collapse. You got a lawyer? She spat. I turned to her. Of course I did. You and your son stole my wedding, my money, and my time. You think I wouldn't get legal backup? Guests gasped, and some whispered loudly. David finally found his voice. This is ridiculous. My lawyer didn't even look at him. Ahem, according to the financial agreement signed before this event, David, you are legally bound to cover all wedding expenses. David choked on air. $335,000, my lawyer continued. Non-negotiable. Martha lost it. This is a scam, she screamed. The lawyer didn't flinch. No, ma'am, it's legally binding. You planned this wedding and swapped out the bride last minute. That means your son now owns the bill. David turned pale. You have until the end of the day, my lawyer added, before we take legal action. A waiter coughed to hide a laugh. Someone muttered, Holish asterisked, and then another voice spoke up. Wait, Sarah? I turned to Sarah. Her voice shook. I wasn't sure I even wanted to hear what she had to say, but she looked broken. She took a deep breath. I knew. Gasps filled the room. David's head snapped toward her. Sarah, shut up. She shook her head wildly. No, I can't. I can't keep lying. Tears welled in her eyes. Martha told me weeks ago. She said they were planning to replace you. She said you weren't the right kind of wife for David. I felt sick. My best friend had known. Sarah wiped her eyes. I wanted to tell you. I really did, but Martha threatened me. She said if I warned you, she'd ruin me. She'd make sure I lost my job. I blinked. Your job. More murmurs from the guests. Sarah looked down, ashamed. Martha owns the firm I work at, she said. She said she'd fire me if I told you. Martha crossed her arms. And I would have, she said coldly. The crowd booed. Someone yelled, Are you serious? Sarah looked at me, desperate. I'm sorry. I should have told you. I was weak. I held up a hand, signaling I needed a moment to process. I turned to David and Martha. You really threatened my best friend's job just to get rid of me. Martha rolled her eyes. It's called handling problems. I exhaled sharply. Unbelievable. But Sarah wasn't done. She turned to David, hands shaking. Tell her the rest. David froze. Martha spun on her. Sarah, don't you dare. Sarah's voice rose. Tell her the rest, David. Silence. Dead silence. I watched David's face crumble. I knew then it was worse than I thought. I stepped forward. David. He wouldn't look at me. Tell me. David swallowed hard, his hands clenched, his jaw locked. Then he finally muttered, Rachel's pregnant. The room exploded. I staggered back. Pregnant? Pregnant? People gasped, whispered, and cursed. Rachel had been my friend. She stole my fiancé, wore my dress, tried to take my wedding, and now she was having his baby, and I was supposed to just disappear. David had the nerve to look sorry, like an apology would fix this. I looked at Martha. So that's what this was about. That's why you wanted me gone. She shrugged like it was obvious. Rachel is giving my son an heir. An heir? Like we were in some royal family? I left. Actually left. David winced. I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. I turned to the guests. Everyone, let's give a big round of applause to David and Rachel, who are expecting a child after stabbing me in the back. Someone actually clapped. A woman in the back muttered, I need more popcorn. David looked miserable. Martha was seething. I was done. I turned to my lawyer. Are we good? He nodded. I'll handle the rest. Perfect. I smoothed down my suit, then I walked out. I had one more move to make, and this was just the beginning. I should have left. I wanted to leave, but something told me I wasn't finished yet. Because after everything, the stolen wedding, the lies, the betrayal, there was still something missing, and I needed to know exactly what it was. I turned back to David, who was rubbing his temples like all of this was giving him a headache, like I was just a problem to deal with. Martha was muttering under her breath, shooting Sarah a death glare, probably wishing she could burn her with her mind. The guests were eating this up. Some had their hands over their mouths in shock. Others had their phones out, recording. Then Rachel came back in. She looked furious, not guilty, not embarrassed. Furious. You just had to ruin everything, she snapped at me, marching straight down the aisle in my dress, like she still belonged there. I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I ruin your big day? She crossed her arms, breathing hard. You weren't supposed to find out like this, she hissed. I stared at her, stunned for a moment. Then I laughed. Actually laughed. You're unbelievable, I said. What part of this did you think I wouldn't find out? The part where you stole my fiancé? The part where you wore my dress? Or the part where you're pregnant with his baby? She flinched, and I knew then that wasn't supposed to come out. David groaned. Rachel, stop talking. I pounced. What else is there, Rachel? I pressed. You might as well spill it all now. She looked away. Martha stepped forward, panicked. Rachel, don't you dare. Too late. Rachel snapped. You think I'm the bad guy, she spat. Do you have any idea what I was promised? The room went silent. David's head jerked up. Rachel, shut up. But she was done keeping secrets. They told me I'd have a perfect life, she said, eyes burning. That David would marry me, that we'd be this perfect couple, that I'd be the new face of their family. I felt my stomach drop. Martha had planned this long before today. She had picked Rachel like a replacement doll. And David had gone along with it. Rachel's voice wobbled. But now I see the truth. I was never going to be the wife. I was just a way to get rid of you. And once the baby's here, she turned on Martha, eyes narrowing. You were going to push me out too, weren't you? Martha's face tightened. Don't be ridiculous. Rachel shook her head. Oh my God, you were, weren't you? That's why you kept saying the baby was the only thing that mattered. David stiffened. Rachel, let's talk about this later. But she was spiraling. You lied to me, she whispered, staring at him. You said you loved me. Martha scoffed. Love doesn't matter, Rachel. A strong family matters. That was it. Rachel lost it. She yanked off the veil, threw it at Martha's feet, and laughed bitterly. I was just another pawn, she said, voice cracking. Just like her. She pointed at me, and suddenly, it hit me. Rachel wasn't my replacement. Rachel and I had been the same. She had fallen for it too. The only difference, I got out before it was too late. Rachel wiped her eyes, turned without another word, and walked out. David called after her. Rachel, wait. She didn't. Martha snapped. This is your fault. She pointed at me. I blinked. My fault. She jabbed a finger at my chest. If you had just left quietly, none of this would have happened. I shook my head. You really don't get it, do you? David didn't love me, and guess what? He doesn't love Rachel either. You've controlled his life, and now you've ruined it. David clenched his jaw. Martha turned to him. Say something, she demanded. David just stood there, silent, pathetic. A man who had finally realized he had lost everything. I could have said something brutal to finish him off, but he wasn't worth it. None of them were. So I stepped back. I turned to my lawyer. Let him go. He nodded. We'll send the final paperwork later. I walked down the aisle, the one I was supposed to walk down in a white dress, past the stunned guests, past the whispers, past Martha shaking with rage. I didn't stop. I didn't look back. David tried to contact me, of course. The messages were pathetic. Can we talk? I made a mistake. I just need a chance to explain. I never answered. Rachel disappeared. She moved away. No one knew where she went. Martha? Well, she lost everything. David never recovered from the scandal. His business deals fell apart. People stopped trusting him. When Martha's reputation began to tank, she turned on David. I heard she moved away to start fresh without him. Karma did all the work for me. And me? I thrived. I moved to a new city, found a real job, made real friends, and I stopped looking back. Because the truth is, I won. Not because I got revenge, not because I embarrassed them, but because I walked away, because I found a life so much better than the one they tried to trap me in. And now when I think about that day, the betrayal and the disaster, I don't feel anything at all. And that's the best revenge of all.
I never expected my life to change because of a three-legged German shepherd. But that's exactly what happened on the day Anson Whitaker walked into our clinic carrying 90 pounds of injured dog in his arms. My name is Lila, and I've been a veterinary nurse at Riverside Animal Hospital for the past 5 years. That Tuesday started like any other: coffee stains on my scrubs, a waiting room full of anxious pet parents, and the familiar antiseptic smell that never quite leaves your nose. Then he burst through the door. Please, someone help. I found her on the side of the road, he called out, his voice steady despite the strain of carrying such a large dog. The shepherd's matted fur was caked with mud, and blood trickled from her rear leg. I rushed forward, already grabbing a gurney. Over here. Put her down gently. Our eyes met briefly as we transferred the dog, and something flickered in my chest that I chose to ignore. There were more important things to focus on. She's lost a lot of blood, I said, checking the dog's gums. Dr. Morris, we need you in exam room 1, stat. The next hour was a blur of activity. The dog, whom Anson had started calling Hope, had been hit by a car. Her back leg was beyond saving, but the rest of her was strong. While Dr. Morris worked, I found myself stealing glances at Anson. He stayed the whole time, his expensive suit getting progressively more wrinkled as he paced the waiting room. "She's going to make it," I told him afterward. "But she'll need somewhere to recover." "I'll take her," he said without hesitation. "I have plenty of space at my house. Though I might need some guidance." He smiled, and that same flutter returned to my chest. That's how I ended up giving my phone number to Anson Whitaker, supposedly just for post-operative care questions. I didn't know then that his mother, Meredith, was watching from her parked Mercedes across the street, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the steering wheel. Over the next few weeks, Anson's medical questions evolved into coffee dates and long walks with Hope, who was adapting remarkably well to life on 3 legs. He was different from anyone I'd ever met, genuine in a way that made his wealth seem almost incidental. Almost. It wasn't until the charity gala at the Whitaker Foundation that reality crashed in. I'd agreed to attend as Anson's date, wearing a borrowed dress that cost more than my monthly rent. That's when I overheard them, Meredith Whitaker and her friend in the powder room, their voices carrying over the marble walls. "Really, Meredith, a veterinary nurse? I thought you had higher hopes for Anson than some girl who cleans up after animals for a living." "Don't worry," Meredith's voice was silk over steel. "These little diversions never last. The Whitakers have standards to maintain. We can't have outsiders thinking they can simply marry their way into proper society." My hands froze in the middle of washing them. Through the mirror, I caught Meredith's reflection as she adjusted her pearl necklace, her eyes meeting mine with calculated precision. She'd known I was there the whole time. I left the bathroom on shaking legs, my mind racing. Anson found me moments later, his face bright with excitement. "There you are. Come on, I want you to meet my grandmother Eleanor. She's the only one in this family whose opinion I actually care about." As he led me through the crowd, I couldn't stop thinking about Meredith's words. But more than that, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than a simple clash of social classes. I had no idea then just how right I was, or that Hope wouldn't be the only one learning to stand strong on fewer legs than she started with. Meeting Eleanor Whitaker was nothing like I expected. While Meredith's words still echoed in my head, the family matriarch took one look at me and broke into a warm smile that reached her eyes. "So you're the one who helped save Hope," she said, reaching for my hands. "Anson hasn't stopped talking about you." The Whitaker Mansion's dining room could have swallowed my entire apartment whole. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow shadows across the mahogany table where we sat for what Anson had promised would be just a casual family dinner. Nothing about the Whitakers was casual. "Lila works at Riverside Animal Hospital," Anson said proudly, squeezing my hand under the table. "She's actually the one who taught me everything about caring for Hope." "A veterinary nurse," Meredith cut in, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "How nurturing. Though I imagine the pay must be challenging, especially in this economy." I felt Anson tense beside me. "Mother, I'm actually quite comfortable," I replied, matching her tone. "There's something rewarding about work that makes a difference." Eleanor's eyes sparkled with interest. "Indeed. I've always believed that true worth isn't measured by a bank account. Douglas, remember when you started as an intern at the company?" Douglas Whitaker, Anson's father, looked up from his phone. "Different times, Mother. The world expects more now." "The world," Meredith added, sipping her wine, "has standards. Speaking of which, Anson, the Prescott's daughter Caroline, is back from Europe. She's taking over their foundation's charitable division." "That's nice," Anson replied flatly. "I'm sure she and her trust fund will be very happy together." Tension in the room thickened. A maid appeared silently to clear our plates, and I noticed how Meredith barely acknowledged her existence. But Eleanor thanked her by name, Maria, and asked about her son's college applications. "Lila," Eleanor said suddenly, "would you help me fetch the dessert? Maria can take a break." In the kitchen, Eleanor's posture changed. "My daughter-in-law means well, but she forgets where she came from sometimes. We all start somewhere. She handed me a crystal serving dish. Don't let her intimidate you, dear. I see how Anson looks at you. Before I could respond, we heard raised voices from the dining room. This isn't about Caroline, Anson was saying. This is about you trying to control my life like always. I'm trying to protect you, Meredith shot back. You have responsibilities, expectations. The only expectation I care about is being happy, Mother. Lila makes me happy. We returned to find Meredith standing, her hands pressed flat against the table. You've known her for what, 2 months? This infatuation will pass. Like yours did with Father? Anson's words cut through the air like a knife. The room went deadly quiet. Douglas finally looked up, his face dark. That's enough. I set down the dessert with shaking hands. I should go. Lila, wait! Anson started to follow me, but Eleanor caught his arm. Let her breathe, dear. Sometimes space is the kindest gift we can give. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with messages from Anson. But it was the last one that made me pull over. I'm sorry about tonight, but I want you to know I've never been more sure about anyone in my life. Meet me tomorrow at the clinic? Hope needs her checkup and I need to see you. I sat there, staring at my phone when another message appeared, this one from an unknown number. Dear Lila, this is Eleanor. I saved your number from Anson's phone. There's something you should know about Meredith. Coffee tomorrow? Some stories are better told in person. My thumb hovered over the reply button. Whatever Eleanor knew, it could change everything. The question was, did I want it to? I thought about Meredith's smug smile, about Anson's defense of our relationship, about Eleanor's knowing looks. Maybe it was time to learn exactly what kind of family I was dealing with. I typed back, name the place and time. Eleanor chose a small cafe far from the Whitakers' usual haunts for our meeting. When I arrived, she was already there, looking less like the family matriarch and more like someone's favorite grandmother in her casual sweater and pearls. Hope trotted beside me, her 3-legged gait now confident and sure. Before we begin, Eleanor said, sliding a manila envelope across the table, you should know that showing you these could cause quite a stir in our family. Inside were photographs, old ones, their edges worn. A young woman in a waitress uniform stood outside a diner, her smile bright and determined. Took me a moment to recognize Meredith. Joe's Diner, 1985, Eleanor explained. That's where Douglas first met her. She was putting herself through community college, working double shifts. My coffee grew cold as Eleanor told me the story. How Meredith had grown up in a trailer park. How she'd reinvented herself after marrying Douglas, methodically erasing every trace of her past. How she'd even changed her accent. The society pages called it a Cinderella story, Eleanor said. But Meredith, she never stopped being afraid someone would discover her secret. She built walls around herself, around this family. And now she's terrified of history repeating itself, I finished, the realization hitting me hard. But why tell me this? Because you need to understand what you're dealing with. Meredith isn't just fighting you, she's fighting her own reflection. My phone buzzed. A text from Anson. Where are you? Mom's here at the clinic. Go, Eleanor said, reading my expression. But remember, sometimes the cruelest people are the ones most afraid of their own shadows. I rushed to the clinic, Hope keeping pace beside me. Through the window, I could see Meredith in her designer suit, speaking to my coworker Zoe. My stomach dropped. There you are. Zoe caught me at the door. Mrs. Whitaker's been asking about your employment history, and your family background, and your credit score. She what? I pushed through to find Meredith examining our medication storage with a critical eye. Ah, Lila. I was just discussing some concerns about the clinic's operations with your supervisor. Seems there might be some irregularities that the board should review. The threat was clear. She could damage not just my relationship with Anson, but my career too. Interesting timing, I said, keeping my voice steady. Especially since our last audit was perfect. But then you'd know all about reinventing yourself, wouldn't you? Meredith's perfectly composed face flickered. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Joe's Diner ring any bells? Color drained from her face. For a moment, I saw that waitress from the photograph, young, scared, desperate to belong. Then her walls slammed back up. Whatever you think you know. I know enough, I cut in. But here's the difference between us, Meredith. I'm not ashamed of where I came from. And I'm not afraid of where I'm going. You have no idea what it takes to survive in this world, she hissed. No, you have no idea what real survival looks like, I gestured to Hope, who sat watching us with wise eyes. It's not about hiding who you are. It's about adapting and moving forward, scars and all. Anson chose that moment to walk in. He looked between us, sensing the tension. Everything okay? Your mother was just leaving, I said, not breaking eye contact with Meredith. Unless there's something else she'd like to share? The threat hung in the air between us. Meredith's hand trembled slightly as she grabbed her purse. We'll continue this discussion later, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. After she left, Anson pulled me close. What was that about? I watched through the window as Meredith got into her Mercedes, her shoulders shaking slightly. The photographs felt heavy in my bag, a weapon I wasn't sure I wanted to use. Just two survivors sizing each other up, I said finally. But I think the real fight's just beginning. The manila envelope sat on my coffee table like a loaded gun. 3 days had passed since my confrontation with Meredith, and Anson had just texted to tell me he was coming over. We needed to talk, he said. Those words never meant anything good. Zoe perched on my couch, watching me pace. You could just show him the photos, she suggested. And this whole thing right now. And prove Meredith right? That I'm exactly the kind of person who'd destroy a family to get what I want. She's trying to destroy your career, Lila. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. A knock at the door made us both jump. Hope bounded over excitedly. She always knew when Anson was near. I opened the door to find him looking exhausted, his usually perfect hair disheveled. Hey, he said, then noticed Zoe. Oh, I didn't realize. I was just leaving. Zoe squeezed my arm as she passed. Remember what I said. Once we were alone, Anson collapsed onto the couch. Hope immediately put her head in his lap. Mother's called an emergency family meeting for tomorrow night. About us. What about us? She says she has concerns about your intentions. He wouldn't meet my eyes. She's been talking to people, digging into your past. My throat tightened. And she found out about your father's gambling debts. The bankruptcy when you were 16. The old shame rushed back. That was a lifetime ago. I know that. But she's convinced you're hiding something else. She's threatening to hire private investigators to expose whatever she finds to the clinic's board. Would you believe her? If she found something? Finally, he looked at me. Would there be anything to find? The envelope seemed to pulse with energy from its spot on the table. One move and I could end this, turn Meredith's weapon against her. But looking at Anson's face, I saw something that scared me more than Meredith's threats doubt. My phone buzzed. A text from Eleanor. Meredith's planning something. Be careful at tomorrow's meeting. Remember, sometimes the best defense is letting your opponent defeat themselves. Lila. Anson's voice pulled me back. What aren't you telling me? I walked to the window, Hope following faithfully. Below, a black car idled across the street, one I'd seen before outside the clinic. Meredith wasn't just threatening investigations, she'd already started them. Your mother came from nothing, I said finally. Did you know that? What? No, she grew up in Connecticut, went to private schools. That's the story she tells. But it's not the truth. Anson stood up. What are you talking about? I turned to face him. If I told you I had proof that your mother's entire identity is a lie, would you want to see it? Or would you rather believe the comfortable story she's created? Are you threatening my mother? I'm asking if you want the truth, even if it hurts. He ran his hands through his hair. I don't know anymore. This whole situation. Maybe we should take a break. Give everyone time to calm down. The words hit like a physical blow. Hope whined, sensing my distress. If we step back now, she wins, I said. Is that what you want? I want peace in my family. His phone chimed. He checked it and his face hardened. I have to go. Mother needs me. After he left, I sat on the floor with Hope, her solid warmth anchoring me. The envelope still waited on the table, but now I saw it differently. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a test. Of me, of Anson, of what kind of person I wanted to be. I picked up my phone and texted Eleanor. I'll be at the meeting tomorrow, but we're doing this my way. Her response came quickly. Sometimes the greatest revenge is refusing to become what they expect you to be. I looked at Hope, who had overcome so much without losing her gentle spirit. Maybe that was the real lesson here. The Whitaker mansion felt different at night. Shadows crept across marble floors as I followed Maria, the housekeeper, to the study. She squeezed my hand before leaving, a small gesture of solidarity that meant everything. I'd left the envelope at home. Whatever happened tonight, it wouldn't be because I chose the nuclear option. The family was already assembled. Douglas behind his desk, Eleanor in her favorite armchair, Anson pacing by the window. Meredith stood when I entered, a folder in her hands and triumph in her eyes. Thank you for joining us, Lila. We have matters to discuss concerning your relationship with our family. Mother, please, Anson started. No, let her speak, I said, taking the only empty seat. I'm curious what else you've dug up about my past. Meredith's smile tightened. It's not just your past that concerns us. It's your present. Your sudden interest in our son, your convenient position at the clinic where wealthy clients bring their pets. She began laying out papers like playing cards. My father's bankruptcy documents, old eviction notices, a credit report. Each piece of my struggle laid bare like evidence of a crime. And now this, she said, producing a final document with flourish. An application for a small business loan submitted last week. How convenient that you'd seek to open your own veterinary practice just as your relationship with Anson grows serious. My heart stopped. I told no one about that application except Zoe. The loan officer had promised confidentiality. You're monitoring my financial records? The realization made me sick. We're protecting our family's interests, Douglas interjected, finally looking up from his phone. By breaking the law. Eleanor's voice cut through the tension. Douglas, tell me you didn't authorize this. It doesn't matter how we obtained the information, Meredith pressed on. What matters is the pattern it reveals. A calculating young woman, using our son to elevate her station. Stop. Anson's voice was quiet but firm. Lila, is it true? The loan application? I met his eyes. Yes, 'cause I believe in building something of my own. Something no one can take away from me. How admirable, Meredith sneered. And I suppose my son's connection to several wealthy pet owners had nothing to do with your timing? That's enough. Eleanor stood, her frail frame somehow commanding the room. Meredith, you're so focused on protecting this family from outsiders that you can't see you're destroying it from within. Mother, please stay out of this, Douglas warned. No, I don't think I will. Eleanor moved to stand beside me. Lila, dear, would you like to tell them about the other document? The one you've been choosing not to show? Meredith's face flickered with uncertainty. I could, I said, watching Meredith carefully. But I don't think I need to. 'Cause this isn't about me, is it, Meredith? It's about you and what you're afraid I'll become. Or maybe what you're afraid I already am, a mirror. Color drained from Meredith's face. For a moment, I saw that young waitress again, desperate to belong. I don't know what you're talking about, she whispered, but her hands were shaking. Grandmother. Anson looked between us, confusion evident. What's going on? Before anyone could respond, Douglas's phone rang. He answered, listened, then looked at me with something like respect. The loan application, he said. It's been approved. Not by any of our family's banks, but by a small credit union in Connecticut. He turned to Meredith. Your hometown, isn't it, dear? The silence that followed was deafening. Meredith gripped the edge of the desk, her carefully constructed world teetering on the brink. I think, Eleanor said gently, it's time we all told the truth. The whole truth. I stood up, my decision made. No, I think it's time I left. Some truths need to be told by the people who've lived them. As I walked out, Anson called after me. But I kept going, Hope's lessons about survival echoing in my mind. Sometimes moving forward means letting go of the need to win. Behind me, I heard Meredith begin to cry. 3 days after I walked out of the Whitaker mansion, Anson proposed. Not with a carefully planned speech or expensive dinner, but in the clinic parking lot. Rain soaking through our scrubs after treating an emergency case together. Should have been perfect. Instead, it felt like the beginning of the end. The engagement party at the Whitaker estate was Meredith's idea. One last chance, she'd said, her voice hollow, to do things properly. She hadn't spoken about that night in the study, and neither had I. The photos remained hidden in my apartment, a loaded gun I couldn't bring myself to fire. I should have known better. The ballroom sparkled with crystal and old money. Hope wasn't allowed inside. Not appropriate for such an occasion, Meredith had insisted. I felt her absence like a missing limb. You look uncomfortable, Eleanor observed, appearing beside me. Like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Aren't I always with this family? She squeezed my hand. Meredith's been unusually quiet these past few days. Be careful. I spotted Anson across the room, surrounded by his parents' friends. Caught my eye and smiled, but didn't come over. We'd barely spoken since the proposal, both pretending everything was fine. Then Meredith clinked her glass for attention. I'd like to propose a toast, she said, her voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room. To new beginnings. To truth. To family. My stomach dropped. Eleanor gripped my arm. Many of you know how protective I am of my son, Meredith continued. How I've always wanted the best for him, which is why it pains me to do this. She nodded to Douglas, who pressed a button. The ballroom screens lit up with security camera footage me entering my apartment building late at night. With James Harrison, one of the clinic's wealthy clients. Taken last week, Meredith announced. And the week before that. Always late at night, always when Anson was away on business. The room erupted in whispers. I stood frozen, remembering those nights, the emergency calls about Harrison's sick dog, the late-night treatments, confidential discussions about investing in my future clinic. Mother, stop this, Anson's voice cut through the chaos. But he wasn't looking at me. The timing of her loan approval is interesting, isn't it? Meredith pressed on. Right after these. Meetings began. It's not what you think, I started, but my voice sounded weak even to me. What I think, Meredith's voice turned sharp, is that you've been playing us all. Using my son while securing your future with one of our oldest family friends. James Harrison is my business partner, I finally managed. He's investing in my clinic because he believes in my work. That's all. Is that why you kept these meetings secret? Why you never mentioned them to Anson? I looked at Anson, saw the doubt in his eyes. I wanted to tell you, but after everything with your mother, I was afraid. Afraid we'd see the truth? Meredith smiled. Well, now everyone can see it. The room spun. I saw the judgment in their faces, heard the whispers. Even Douglas looked away. Enough. Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. Meredith, you've gone too far. But Meredith wasn't finished. I have the contract here signed last week. A very generous investment with some interesting conditions about future client relationships. She was twisting everything, turning my dream into something dirty. And Anson still hadn't moved. I walked to the center of the room, facing Meredith directly. You want to talk about secret meetings? Secret contracts? Should we discuss Joe's diner, Meredith? Should we talk about where you really came from? The room went deadly quiet. Meredith's face drained of color. Go ahead, she whispered. Show them. Prove exactly what kind of person you are. I felt the weight of every eye in the room. Saw Eleanor's sad smile, Douglas's calculating gaze, Anson's confusion. In that moment, I understood I could win this battle, but I'd lose everything that mattered. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the ballroom. Behind me, I heard Anson call my name, but I didn't stop. Some victories aren't worth the cost of winning. I found Meredith in the garden, exactly where Eleanor said she'd be. She stood among her precious roses, still wearing her party dress, though the perfectly styled hair had come undone. The manila envelope felt heavy in my hands. Come to finish what you started, she asked without turning around. To expose me to everyone who's left? Most of them already left after your performance. I moved closer, watching her shoulders tense. But that's not why I'm here. She laughed, brittle and sharp. Then why? To gloat? To tell me how I've become everything I feared. To give you these. I held out the envelope. They belong to you. Finally, she turned. Her mascara had left dark trails down her cheeks, but her spine was still steel straight. I don't want your pity. Good, because this isn't pity. This is me choosing to be better than what you tried to make me. A noise from the terrace made us both turn. Anson stood there, watching. Behind him, Eleanor and Douglas emerged from the shadows. They must have followed me. What's going on? Anson asked, his voice uncertain. Meredith's hand shook as she took the envelope. Nothing that concerns. Everything, Eleanor cut in. Everything that's happened concerns all of us. Infinite, Meredith. It's time. The photos spilled out, scattering across the garden path. Young Meredith in her waitress uniform. The diner. The trailer park. A life she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself it never existed. I worked every shift I could get, Meredith whispered, picking up one photo. Saved every penny. Changed my accent, my clothes, my entire life. And then you met Father, Anson said, realization dawning in his eyes. I loved him, Meredith's voice cracked. But I loved what he represented more. Security. Respect. Never having to feel ashamed again. So you became someone else entirely, I said quietly. And when you saw me with Anson, I saw myself. Everything I'd run from. Everything I'd fought to forget. She looked at me directly for the first time. I couldn't let you do to him what I did to Douglas. What you did to me. Douglas stepped forward. Meredith, I fell in love with that waitress who worked double shifts and dreamed of something better. Not this performance you've been putting on for 30 years. You knew. Meredith's voice was barely a whisper. I've always known. I thought eventually you'd trust me enough to be yourself again. He picked up one of the photos. I miss her sometimes. Anson moved to stand beside me, his hand finding mine. All this time you were fighting your own reflection in Lila. But she's nothing like you, Mother. She never hid who she was. Even when you gave her every reason to be ashamed, she stood her ground. The meetings with James Harrison, I added softly, were about creating something of my own. Not because I wanted to escape who I am, but because I'm proud of who I've become. Despite everything, Meredith sank onto a garden bench, the photos scattered around her like fallen leaves. I don't know how to be that person anymore. The one who wasn't afraid. Then maybe, Eleanor said, her voice gentle but firm, it's time to learn again. Starting with the truth about why you really fought so hard against Lila. Because she's everything I couldn't be, Meredith whispered. Strong enough to be herself no matter what anyone thinks. The garden fell silent except for the distant sound of departing cars. The last of the party guests, leaving with fresh gossip about the Whitaker family drama. What happens now? Anson asked, his thumb tracing circles on my hand. I looked at Meredith, saw the scared young woman beneath the polished exterior. Now we all decide who we want to be. Not who we think we should be. Meredith stood slowly, gathering the photos with trembling hands. I don't deserve your forgiveness. No, I agreed. But maybe we both deserve a chance to start over. The night air shifted, carrying the scent of roses and possibility. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in destroying your enemy, but in refusing to let them destroy themselves. 6 months later, I stood in the doorway of my new clinic, watching Meredith struggle with Hope's leash. The German Shepherd had taken to her weekly therapy sessions with surprising enthusiasm, though I suspected it had more to do with the treats Meredith smuggled in her designer handbag than any medical necessity. She's favoring her right side again, Meredith noted, her once perfect manicure now slightly chipped. She'd started volunteering at the clinic 3 months ago, much to everyone's surprise, especially her own. Dogs are good at reading people, I said, checking Hope's gait. They know when someone's trying to change. The bell chimed as Eleanor entered, followed by Douglas. They'd become regular fixtures here, Eleanor with her business advice and Douglas with his unexpected talent for calming anxious pets. The contractor finally finished the renovation plans, Douglas announced, spreading blueprints across the reception desk. The old diner's structure is solid. It just needs updating. Meredith's hands stilled on Hope's fur. Joe's Diner? That's where you're opening the second location. It seemed fitting, I replied, watching her carefully. A place for new beginnings. She was quiet for a moment then. The coffee was terrible there, but the pie was something special. I remember, Douglas said softly. The door chimed again. Anson walked in, still in his surgical scrubs from the hospital where he'd started volunteering. He'd discovered a passion for veterinary medicine that surprised everyone except me. Ready for lunch? He asked, kissing my cheek. Mom, you're coming too, right? That little Italian place you used to work at? Meredith tensed, then relaxed. I haven't been there in 30 years. I wonder if Marco still makes those garlic knots. Only one way to find out, Eleanor said, her eyes twinkling. As they headed out, I stayed behind to finish some paperwork. Through the window, I watched them walk together, Meredith and Douglas hand in hand, Eleanor sharing some story that made them all laugh, Hope trotting alongside like she'd always belonged. Zoe appeared beside me, sorting through patient files. Still can't believe how things turned out, huh? Sometimes the happy ending isn't what you expect, I said, touching my engagement ring, a simple band Anson had reproposed with. This time in the clinic where we'd met, Hope as our witness. Speaking of unexpected, Zoe hesitated. Meredith asked me about taking some vet tech classes at the community college. Said something about it never being too late to be who you might have been. I smiled. Remembering the photos now proudly displayed in the Whitaker home, young Meredith in her waitress uniform next to recent ones of family dinners and clinic events. No more hiding, no more shame. The mail arrived, bringing the usual mix of bills and business correspondence. But one envelope stood out, cream-colored, expensive paper. Inside was an invitation to the annual Whitaker Foundation Gala. But this year was different. The cause? A scholarship program for veterinary students from underprivileged backgrounds. The location? The newly renovated Joe's Diner. A note fell out, written in Meredith's elegant hand. Some debts can never be repaid, but perhaps they can be passed forward. Thank you for showing me that the person I was running from was the person I needed to become again. M. I tucked the invitation away, thinking about revenge and redemption, about the ways we hurt people by hurting ourselves, about how sometimes the greatest act of love is letting someone find their way back to themselves. Hope barked outside, impatient for me to join the others for lunch. Through the window, I saw Meredith laugh, a real laugh, unguarded and free. She caught my eye and nodded, a gesture of understanding between two women who had learned that the strongest foundations are built on truth, not pretense. I grabbed my coat and headed out. After all, I had a family waiting for me, and they were exactly the kind of imperfect I'd always needed them to be. I never expected my life to implode on a random Tuesday afternoon. But there I was, staring at my sister-in-law Vanessa on my doorstep, her two kids hanging off her like Christmas ornaments, and enough luggage to suggest this wasn't just a casual visit. My name is Rachel, and until that moment, I'd managed to maintain a careful balance between my marriage and my sanity. Working as an assistant editor-in-chief meant I needed my home to be my sanctuary, a quiet place where I could decompress after wrestling with deadlines and demanding authors all day. "Surprise!" Vanessa chirped, her perfectly glossed lips curved into what I'd come to recognize as her "I need something" smile. The kids and I thought we'd come for a little visit. Before I could process what was happening, her son Oliver darted past me into the house, his sister Chloe following close behind. The sound of something crashing in my living room made me wince. "Oh, don't worry about that," Vanessa waved dismissively. "Kids will be kids, right?" I stood frozen in the doorway as she wheeled in two massive suitcases, followed by what looked like a portable wardrobe. "How long exactly are you planning to stay?" "Just until things settle down," she said vaguely, already making herself at home. "Ethan didn't tell you?" I could have sworn he said he'd handle it. "My husband." Of course. Speaking of the devil, Ethan chose that moment to come home early from work, something he never did. His face lit up at the sight of his sister, and they embraced like they hadn't seen each other in years rather than the 3 weeks since our last forced family dinner. "You made it!" he exclaimed, helping bring in more bags. "Rachel, isn't this great? The house will finally feel alive." I caught the slight emphasis on finally and felt my stomach twist. Our house was plenty alive, with conversation, laughter, and the occasional heated debate about comma placement. Just because we didn't have children running around breaking things didn't mean we were living in a mausoleum. "Ethan," I said carefully, "can we talk for a minute?" He followed me to the kitchen, still beaming. I could hear Oliver and Chloe thundering up and down the stairs, probably marking their territory like overwrought puppies. "When were you planning to tell me about this?" "I knew you'd overthink it if I told you in advance," he said, reaching for the coffee maker. "It's just temporary. Vanessa's going through some stuff with her ex, and she needs a safe place for the kids. And our home was volunteered without any discussion? They're family, Rachel. We have 3 empty bedrooms collecting dust. What's the big deal?" Before I could respond, there was another crash upstairs, followed by giggling and what sounded suspiciously like water running. "I should check on that," Ethan said, already turning away. "Try to relax, okay? This'll be good for us." I watched him bound up the stairs, leaving me alone in my rapidly shrinking kitchen. My phone buzzed, a text from my best friend Lila. "Still on for wine night tomorrow?" I was about to reply when Vanessa swooped in, phone in hand. "Oh, Rachel, I hope you don't mind, but I invited Mom and Dad to come stay too. They're worried about the kids adjusting, and you know how Mom gets. They'll be here Thursday." She disappeared before I could respond, her voice carrying down the hallway as she coordinated with my in-laws. I gripped the kitchen counter, my knuckles white, as the reality of my situation sank in. My peaceful home was being invaded, my husband had conspired behind my back, and my mother-in-law, who'd once suggested I was too career-focused to be a proper wife, was arriving in 2 days. I picked up my phone and typed a quick response to Lila. "Make it a bottle. Maybe 2. We need to talk." Above me, something that sounded expensive shattered, followed by Ethan's laughter and his sister's theatrical apologies. But it was the sight of Vanessa's divorce papers, partially visible in her open purse on my counter, that made my blood run cold. This wasn't going to be temporary at all. The first 48 hours with my uninvited house guests felt like being trapped in a reality show I never auditioned for. I'd retreated to my home office, the only space still untouched by Hurricane Vanessa, when the smell of burning jolted me from my work. I rushed to the kitchen to find Oliver attempting to make grilled cheese with the burner on high, while Vanessa lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Oliver, step back," I said, quickly moving the smoking pan. "Where's your mom?" "Right here," Vanessa called out, not looking up. "He's fine. He makes his own lunch all the time at home." Charred remains of what was once my favorite non-stick pan told a different story. I bit back a response, remembering my grandmother's advice about choosing battles wisely. Instead, I made Oliver a proper sandwich, trying not to notice how he wolfed it down like he hadn't eaten all day. "Hey, while you're in there," Vanessa piped up, "could you make me something too? I'm starving." Before I could respond, Ethan burst through the door carrying shopping bags. "Family dinner tonight," he announced. "Mom and Dad are coming early." Surprise! My stomach dropped. Early? They weren't supposed to be here until tomorrow. "Mom couldn't wait," he grinned, unpacking groceries. "And wait till you hear the best part, they're bringing Aunt Susan and Uncle Mike too." I watched as he and Vanessa high-fived like teenagers planning a party. Kitchen counter disappeared under ingredients as Ethan pulled out recipe after recipe. "Honey," I said carefully, "I have that big manuscript deadline tomorrow. Remember." "Come on, Rachel," Vanessa interjected, finally looking up from her phone. "Family comes first. You can do your little editing thing anytime." I caught Ethan nodding along with his sister and felt something crack inside me. My little editing thing pays half the mortgage on this house. "Speaking of the house," Vanessa said, her tone suddenly serious, "Mom mentioned you two might be thinking of moving to a bigger place. You know, something more family-friendly." The look that flashed across Ethan's face told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't just another one of Vanessa's random comments, they'd been discussing our future without me. "I need some air," I managed, heading for the door. Ethan caught my arm. "Where are you going?" "My parents will be here in an hour." "Then I'll be back in 59 minutes. I drove to Lila's house on autopilot, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. She took one look at me and poured 2 glasses of wine. "They're planning to stay permanently, aren't they?" she asked after I'd spilled everything. "Worse," I said. "I think Ethan's been planning this with them. He's never home early, never cooks, never arranges family gatherings. But suddenly he's super host. Have you checked your joint account lately?" I froze with my wine glass halfway to my lips. "Why?" "Just a hunch," Lila said carefully. "But moving to a family-friendly house takes money." I pulled out my phone, logged into our banking app, and felt the blood drain from my face. There had been several large transfers to a savings account I didn't recognize, all in the past month. "I have to go," I said, standing up so quickly I almost knocked over my wine. When I got home, the house was already full of people. Geraldine had taken over my kitchen, rearranging everything to her liking. Harold sat in my reading chair, while Vanessa's kids ran circles around the dining room table. Aunt Susan was critiquing my choice of curtains. But it was the conversation I overheard between Ethan and Vanessa in the hallway that stopped me cold. "Did you get Rachel to sign those papers yet?" Vanessa whispered. "Not yet," Ethan replied. "But Mom says once the house transfer is done, it won't matter. Rachel will have to adjust or..." He trailed off as I rounded the corner, his face freezing in that deer-in-headlights look I'd never seen before. Behind him, Vanessa smirked. "Perfect timing," she said. "Mom's just about to serve dinner. Hope you don't mind, but we had to throw out some of your old dishes to make room for hers. They were a bit dated." I smiled, a plan already forming in my mind. "No problem at all. What's family for, right?" I spent the next morning in my office, not editing manuscripts but digging through our financial records. Each discovery felt like another nail in my marriage's coffin. The papers Vanessa mentioned weren't just about a house transfer. Ethan had been systematically moving our assets around for months. My phone buzzed with another text from him. "Mom's making her famous pot roast tonight. Don't work too late." I ignored it, focusing instead on the email from our bank. The joint account I'd contributed to for years had been quietly drained, with regular transfers to an account in his name only. The final transfer had happened just days before Vanessa's arrival. A knock at my office door made me jump. It was Oliver, clutching a tablet. "Aunt Rachel? Mom says I need your work password for the Wi-Fi." I blinked. "The guest network password is on the fridge." "No, she says she needs the other one. The one for your work computer." Of course she did. I was about to refuse when I heard Vanessa's voice from the hallway. "Just let him use your laptop, Rachel. Don't be difficult." I turned to find her leaning against the doorframe, that familiar smirk playing on her lips. Behind her, I could see moving boxes stacked in the hallway, boxes I hadn't noticed before. "Those are new," I said carefully. "Oh, those?" Vanessa waved dismissively. "Just some things Mom thought would look better in here. Your stuff is in the garage. My grandmother's antique mirror. My books. My life." "Where's Ethan?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. "Meeting with the lawyer," she replied, then quickly added, "About my divorce, of course." But her slight hesitation told me everything. I stood up, closing my laptop. "Tell your mother I won't be home for dinner." "Again?" Vanessa sighed dramatically. "You know, Ethan always said you were difficult about family stuff, but I didn't want to believe it. The poor guy, always having to choose between his wife and his family." I walked past her down the stairs, my mind racing. In the kitchen, Geraldine was replacing my coffee maker with her own ancient model. "Oh, good, you're here," she said without looking up. "Sign these consent forms for the school. We're enrolling the children next week." I picked up the papers. They weren't school forms, they were property transfer documents, already bearing Ethan's signature. "Where did you get these?" "Ethan left them for you," she replied smoothly. "It's just a formality, dear. You know how these things work." But I did know how these things worked. 5 years as an editor had taught me to read the fine print. These papers would sign away my rights to the house I'd helped pay for, the house I'd helped renovate. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Lila. "Did you check the safety deposit box?" The safety deposit box. The one where I kept my grandmother's jewelry, my emergency fund, and most importantly, the original deed to the house, the one showing my name as co-owner. I grabbed my keys, but Vanessa stepped in front of the door. "Where are you going?" "Mom's already starting dinner." "Move," I said quietly. "You know," she said, not budging, "Ethan was right. You really don't understand what family means." "No, Vanessa. You don't understand what you've done." I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I'd saved earlier that morning. "Hello, Detective Martinez? Remember that fraud case we discussed? I'd like to move forward with the investigation." Color drained from Vanessa's face. Behind her, Geraldine dropped a plate. "You wouldn't," Vanessa whispered. "We're family." I smiled, feeling strangely calm. "You're right. Family should look out for each other. That's why I've been recording everything since that interesting conversation I overheard last night." As if on cue, my phone pinged with an email from my lawyer, confirming receipt of all the documentation I'd sent over that morning. "Now," I said, "I believe you're in my way." The safety deposit box was empty. I stood in the bank vault, staring at the void where my grandmother's jewelry and emergency fund should have been. The bank manager shuffled uncomfortably behind me. "The access records show your husband visited last week," he said. "With proper authorization, of course." "Of course." My signature, perfectly forged on the access form, stared back at me. 5 years of marriage, and I never knew Ethan could replicate my handwriting. My phone buzzed. Lila again. Rachel, where are you? Ethan's looking for you everywhere. Says it's urgent. I bet he did. I texted back. Meet me at Carlo's. Bring your laptop. Carlo's was our code for serious trouble. The little cafe had been my sanctuary during the worst times after my parents' death, and Lila knew what it meant if I wanted to meet there. When I arrived, she already had 2 coffees waiting. How bad? Everything's gone, I said, my voice hollow. The deed, the jewelry, the money, all of it. That's impossible, she frowned, opening her laptop. The deed is registered with the county. Even if he took the physical copy. She trailed off, her fingers flying over the keyboard. Then she turned the screen toward me. Rachel, when did you sign this? I stared at the document. It was a transfer of deed dated 3 months ago with my signature at the bottom. Except I hadn't signed anything 3 months ago. He's been planning this since before Vanessa showed up, I whispered. There's more, Lila said quietly. Check your email. The message was from my publishing house's HR department. Someone had requested my employment records, again with my forged signature. They were building a paper trail documenting every aspect of my life they could control. My phone rang. Ethan. I let it go to voicemail. You need a lawyer, Lila said. Now. I need more than that, I replied, pulling out my own laptop. I need proof. We spent the next hour documenting everything. Bank transfers, forged signatures, suspicious timing. With each discovery, the weight in my chest grew heavier. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Oliver. Aunt Rachel, where are you? Mom's crying and Grandma says it's your fault. Before I could respond, another message came through, a photo from Vanessa. It showed my home office, completely transformed into a children's bedroom. My books were gone, my desk replaced with bunk beds. The kids love their new room, the caption read. Family dinner at 6. Don't be late. They're trying to erase me, I said, my voice cracking. Piece by piece, they're writing me out of my own life. Lila reached across the table and grabbed my hand. No, they're showing you exactly who they are. The question is, what are you going to do about it? My phone rang again. This time it was Harold, my father-in-law. I almost declined the call, but something made me answer. Rachel, he said quietly, I know what they're doing. Meet me at the park in 20 minutes. Come alone. I looked at Lila, who was already packing up her laptop. Go, she said. I'll have my phone ready if you need backup. Park was empty except for Harold, sitting on our usual bench. He looked older somehow, tired. I tried to stop them, he said as I sat down. But Geraldine, she's convinced this is what's best for everyone. Best for everyone? I echoed. They're stealing my life. No, he replied, pulling an envelope from his jacket. They're trying to steal your future. But they forgot about the past. Inside the envelope was a letter written in my grandmother's handwriting, dated just before she died. A letter I'd never seen before, addressed to my future self. How did you get this? Geraldine took it from your office, he said. She was going to destroy it, but I couldn't let that happen. Your grandmother. She knew something like this might happen. Read it. As I opened the letter, Harold stood up. Whatever you decide to do, Rachel, know that not all family is bound by blood. Sometimes the strongest bonds are the ones we choose for ourselves. He walked away, leaving me alone with my grandmother's last words and a decision that would change everything. My grandmother's letter changed everything. I sat in my car outside the house, my house, reading it for the 3rd time. Her words about protecting what's yours, not just possessions but your dignity, your self-worth, hit harder now than they would have 5 years ago. The front door opened and Ethan stepped out, phone pressed to his ear. I don't care what it takes, he was saying. Just make sure those accounts are locked down by morning. I watched him pace the driveway, this stranger wearing my husband's face. Through the living room window, I could see Vanessa directing movers, pointing at my remaining furniture. Geraldine stood in the kitchen, probably planning another family dinner I wouldn't attend. My phone buzzed, a text from Oliver. "Mom says you're being selfish. Are you coming home?" Home. The word felt hollow now. I stepped out of the car just as Ethan ended his call. His face flickered between relief and something darker when he saw me. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "Mom's worried sick." "Is she?" I walked past him toward the house. "Or is she worried about what I might do?" He grabbed my arm. "Rachel, don't start. The family's finally coming together. Why can't you just let go of me?" My voice was quiet but firm. "Now." Something in my tone made him release me. Inside, Vanessa was instructing the movers to take my grandmother's antique writing desk. "Stop," I said. "Oh, look who finally showed up," Vanessa smirked. "We're just making room for the kids' study area. They need it more than you do. That desk isn't yours to give away." Actually, Ethan cut in, according to the new deed. "The forged deed." I turned to face him. "The one you had someone copy my signature on?" The movers paused, looking uncertain. Geraldine emerged from the kitchen, her face tight with concern. "Rachel, dear," she started, "you're clearly upset." "Clearly," I agreed, pulling out my phone. Just like the bank manager was clearly upset when I showed him the forged authorization forms. And my publishing house's legal team was clearly upset about the fraudulent records requests. Color drained from Ethan's face. "You're bluffing." I played the recording from earlier, his phone conversation about locking down accounts. Then I showed them the email from my lawyer, confirming the fraud investigation was proceeding. "Get out," Vanessa hissed. "You ungrateful." "No," I cut her off. "You get out. All of you. You have 1 hour." "This is my house," Ethan said, but his voice wavered. "Check your phone," I replied. On cue, his phone buzzed with a notification. I watched as he read the emergency injunction my lawyer had just filed, freezing all assets and preventing any further property transfers. "You can't do this," Geraldine protested. "We're family." "Family?" I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. "Family doesn't forge signatures. Family doesn't steal inheritances. Family doesn't try to erase someone from their own life." Oliver appeared at the top of the stairs, Chloe behind him. "Mom? What's happening?" Vanessa rushed to shield them as if I were the threat. "Nothing, sweetie. Your Aunt Rachel is just being dramatic." "No," I said, looking directly at the kids. "Your Aunt Rachel is finally standing up for herself. Something your mother should have taught you about." I turned to the movers. "Put everything back exactly where you found it. I'll pay you double." They nodded, already reversing course. Finn stepped toward me, his charm sliding back into place. "Honey, let's talk about this." "The police will be here in 20 minutes, I interrupted. "They're very interested in those forged documents. Your choice if you want to be here when they arrive." The next 15 minutes were chaos, Vanessa screaming, Geraldine crying, Harold watching silently from the corner. But they left, taking their belongings with them. As Ethan walked out last, he turned back. "You'll regret this." I thought of my grandmother's letter, of her words about standing your ground. "No," I said. "For the first time in years, I don't regret anything." I closed the door on my old life and locked it. 3 days after I kicked them out, I came home to find my front door unlocked and music spilling from inside. For a moment, I thought I'd walked into the wrong house. Every surface was covered in flowers and decorations, and the air smelled of Geraldine's signature pot roast. A party was in full swing in my living room. My in-laws' entire social circle milled about, drinking wine from my grandmother's crystal glasses. Vanessa held court near the fireplace, while Oliver and Chloe ran through the crowd with plates of cake. "Rachel!" Ethan appeared at my side, all smiles and charm. You're just in time for the announcement. What announcement? My voice sounded distant over the buzzing in my ears. About the house, of course. Geraldine stepped forward, clinking her glass for attention. Everyone gather round. Crowd quieted, and I noticed several faces I recognized, neighbors, colleagues from Ethan's firm, even a few of my own co-workers. All watching, all waiting. As you know, Geraldine continued, this lovely home has been in our family for generations. That was the first lie. I'd bought it with my inheritance from my grandmother. And now, thanks to Ethan's wonderful planning, it will continue to be a true family home, with Vanessa and her children moving in permanently. Applause erupted. Someone pressed a glass of champagne into my hand. Through the crowd, I caught Harold's eye. He looked away quickly, shame written across his face. The papers are all signed, Ethan whispered in my ear. You might have frozen some accounts, but you forgot about the power of attorney you gave me last year when you were in the hospital. Everything's legal now. The champagne glass slipped from my fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor. The noise drew Oliver's attention, and he ran over. Aunt Rachel! Mom says we're keeping your office as our playroom. Can we paint it? Vanessa appeared behind him, victory gleaming in her eyes. Of course you can, sweetie. It's your room now. I looked around at my home, my grandmother's antiques replaced with modern furniture, family photos replaced with portraits of Vanessa's children. My books nowhere in sight. Where are my things? My voice cracked. In storage, Ethan said smoothly. We'll sort through them later. Now smile, people are watching. They were. Every eye in the room seemed fixed on me, waiting for my reaction. This was their plan: back me into a corner, surround me with witnesses, force me to accept their version of events or look like the unreasonable one. My phone buzzed. A text from Lila. Got the evidence. Police are on their way. Hold on. But before I could respond, Geraldine clinked her glass again. And one more announcement. Ethan, would you like to share the wonderful news? He stepped forward, that familiar, charming smile in place. Rachel and I have decided to take a break. She'll be staying with friends while we sort things out. It's all very amicable. The room filled with sympathetic murmurs. I saw my coworkers exchange glances, probably remembering all the times I defended Ethan's behavior. That's not true, I said, but my voice was lost in the noise. Vanessa stepped closer, speaking low enough that only I could hear. Face it, Rachel. You lost. The house is ours legally. Your precious grandmother's things are gone. Even your colleagues think you're having a breakdown. Just walk away while you still have some dignity. I felt the walls closing in, the room spinning. Everything I'd built, everything I'd protected was being stripped away in front of an audience. Then I saw Oliver picking up one of my grandmother's crystal glasses, preparing to throw it to his sister. Catch, Chloe. The glass arced through the air in slow motion. In that moment, I had a choice: let it shatter like everything else in my life, or finally take control. I caught the glass inches from the floor. Actually, I said, my voice carrying across the suddenly quiet room, I have an announcement of my own. The front door burst open, and Detective Martinez stepped in, followed by 2 uniformed officers. Perfect timing, I said, meeting Ethan's shocked gaze. Let's talk about fraud, forgery, and family, shall we? The aftermath of the party felt like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. Detective Martinez methodically collected statements while party guests fled, leaving behind half-empty glasses and whispered apologies. Ethan sat on my couch, his head in his hands, while Vanessa paced frantically, phone pressed to her ear. Your lawyer's not picking up, she snapped at Ethan. Fix this. I stood by my grandmother's writing desk, now back in its rightful place, as Detective Martinez laid out the evidence: forged signatures, fraudulent bank transfers, and the smoking gun emails between Ethan and a document forger, discussing payment for delicate family matters. This is ridiculous, Geraldine interrupted. We're protecting family assets. Rachel never understood what family means. Family! Harold's voice cut through the room. We all turned to see him standing in the doorway, holding a familiar wooden box. Is this what family means? He opened the box, revealing my grandmother's jewelry, the pieces Ethan claimed were in storage. I found this hidden in Vanessa's guest room. Dad, Ethan started, but Harold held up his hand. No more lies. He placed the box on the desk beside me. I've watched this family destroy everything good in the name of protection and togetherness. I won't stay silent anymore. Vanessa lunged for the box. Those are mine now. The house transfer is void, Detective Martinez interjected, along with every other document Mr. Walker forged. Speaking of which, she nodded to an officer who stepped forward with handcuffs. You can't be serious, Ethan laughed, but the sound was hollow. Rachel, tell them this is just a misunderstanding. I picked up my grandmother's sapphire ring, the one she'd promised would be my something blue at my wedding. You know what I don't understand, Ethan? How you could sleep beside me every night while plotting to steal my home. I didn't steal anything. I was protecting our future. Your future, I corrected. With your perfect family picture. Your sister in my office, your mother in my kitchen, your name on my grandmother's house. Everything I did for us. No, I said quietly. Everything you did to me. The officer stepped forward again, but Ethan backed away. You're making a mistake. Vanessa, tell them about the agreement. Mom, show them the papers. But Vanessa was already edging toward the door, her survival instincts kicking in. Geraldine stood frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling. Mr. Walker, Detective Martinez said firmly, we can do this here or at the station. Your choice. Ethan's charm cracked completely. This is your fault, he shouted at me. I gave you everything, a family, a purpose. You were nothing before us. Wrong again, I replied, slipping my grandmother's ring onto my finger. I was everything before you. I just forgot for a while. As the officers led Ethan away, Vanessa made one last attempt. The children, she pleaded. Think about what this will do to them. I looked at Oliver and Chloe, huddled together on the stairs. I am thinking about them. They deserve to see that actions have consequences, even for family. Especially for family, Harold added, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. One by one, they left, Ethan in handcuffs, Vanessa clutching her children, Geraldine leaning heavily on Harold's arm. The house fell silent, empty of everything except truth. My phone buzzed with a text from Lila. Need company? I looked around at my reclaimed space, the walls that had witnessed my strongest and weakest moments, the furniture that held memories both bitter and sweet, the windows that would now let in light without shadows. Not tonight, I typed back. For the first time in years, I know exactly where I belong. I sat at my grandmother's desk, running my fingers over the worn wood, and began to write, not about revenge or justice, but about reclaiming yourself when the world tries to write your story for you. Sighed, I heard Ethan's voice one last time, calling my name from the police car. I didn't answer. Some chapters need to end for others to begin. 6 months later, I sat across from Ethan in a sterile conference room, watching him sign the final divorce papers. He looked smaller somehow, his designer suit hanging loose on his frame, his charm dulled by reality. I never meant for it to go this far, he said, pushing the papers toward me. I know. And I did know. That was the tragedy of it all. He'd destroyed our marriage trying to build his perfect family, never realizing what he already had. Outside the lawyer's office, Harold waited on a bench. We'd maintained a careful friendship these past months, meeting for coffee occasionally, both of us trying to understand how family could go so wrong. Vanessa's moving to Seattle, he said as I approached. Fresh start, she says. Kids are adjusting. I thought of Oliver and Chloe, caught in their mother's web of manipulation. They'll figure it out eventually. Kids usually do. Like you did. He smiled sadly. Geraldine still won't admit she was wrong. She visits Ethan every week, tells him he's the victim in all this. And you. I'm selling the house, he said quietly. Too many ghosts? I nodded, understanding completely. My own home had needed months of cleansing, not just physically removing their traces, but emotionally reclaiming each space. My office was mine again, filled with books and manuscripts. Kitchen hummed with my grandmother's old recipes instead of Geraldine's judgments. My phone buzzed, a text from Lila about our weekend plans. Life had settled into a new rhythm, one that felt more authentic than anything I'd known in years. There's something else, Harold said, reaching into his jacket. We found this while packing up the old house. It was hidden in Geraldine's things. He handed me a weathered envelope, my grandmother's distinctive handwriting on the front. For Rachel, when the storm passes. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter dated just weeks before she died, and a small key I recognized from my childhood. My dearest Rachel, the letter began. If you're reading this, you've weathered a storm I always feared would come. I've watched you build your life with such care, but I've also seen the shadows gathering, people who mistake possession for love, control for family. Key, she explained, opened a safety deposit box at her old bank. Inside was everything she'd wanted to protect for me, family photos, legal documents, and a trust fund I'd never known about. Because sometimes, she wrote, the strongest walls aren't the ones we build around our homes, but the ones we build around our hearts. And sometimes, dear one, those walls need to come down for us to truly live. Harold touched my shoulder gently. She knew, didn't she? Even then. She always knew, I whispered, folding the letter carefully. As I drove home, I passed the coffee shop where Ethan and I had first met. The memory didn't sting anymore. It was just another chapter in a story that had taught me more about strength than weakness. At home, I made tea in my grandmother's old pot and sat at her writing desk. The house creaked and settled around me, comfortable in its solitude. On my laptop, the cursor blinked at the top of a blank document. I'd been trying to write about what happened, but every attempt felt incomplete. How do you capture the moment you realize family isn't always about blood? How do you explain that sometimes revenge isn't about destroying others, but about saving yourself? My phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. A photo of Oliver and Chloe, smiling in front of a Welcome to Seattle sign. No words, just the image. I saved it, understanding the message beneath. Some bonds survive even when families break. I turned back to my laptop and began to write, not about betrayal or revenge, but about reconstruction. About how sometimes you have to let your world fall apart to build something truer from the pieces. Sighed, the sun set on another quiet evening, painting my walls with colors that belonged only to me. It all started at what was supposed to be a regular family reunion. You know, the kind where everyone pretends to care about each other's lives while sneaking glances at their phones. I was sipping my third cup of coffee, trying to stay awake through Aunt Mabel's endless tales of her cat's latest antics, when a stranger approached me. He was an older guy, probably in his 60s, with a face that looked like it had seen a lot of life. "Callan Rivers?" he asked, his voice a mix of curiosity and something I couldn't quite place. "Yeah, that's me," I replied, wondering if I should know him. He handed me a worn-out package, wrapped in brown paper. "This is from your father," he said, his eyes holding mine for a moment longer than comfortable. "He wanted you to have it." I was about to ask how he knew my dad, but he turned and disappeared into the crowd like a ghost. I stood there, package in hand, feeling the weight of 1,000 questions suddenly pressing down on me. My name's Cal, by the way. I'm an urban planner, which sounds a lot more exciting than it actually is. Most days, I'm stuck in meetings about zoning laws and public transit routes. But today, I was holding a piece of my father's past, and I had no idea what to do with it. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found a quiet corner to open the package. Inside was a vintage camera, the kind you'd see in old movies, along with several undeveloped film rolls. Weird, right? My dad was never into photography, at least not as far as I knew. I turned the camera over in my hands, noticing a small note tucked into the case. The handwriting was unmistakable, my father's. It simply said, "Find the truth." Short, cryptic, and thoroughly unsettling. I spent the rest of the reunion in a daze, my mind miles away from the chatter around me. Even my brother Nolan's attempts to engage me in conversation barely registered. Nolan's the peacekeeper in the family, always trying to smooth things over. But today, even he couldn't pull me back from the edge of this mystery. Later that night, after the obligatory hugs and goodbyes, I found myself in my tiny apartment, staring at the camera. I decided to develop the film. It was a long shot, but I had to know what my father wanted me to see. A few days later, I picked up the developed photos. My heart pounded as I flipped through them, each image more confusing than the last. There was my father, looking younger and happier than I'd ever seen him, with an unfamiliar woman and a little girl. They looked like a family. But who were they? I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something big, something my mother, Lorraine, would never talk about. She's always been the keeper of secrets, the one who held our family together with an iron grip. But now I was holding a secret of my own, and it was tearing me apart. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. But I knew confronting my mother wouldn't be easy. Lorraine Rivers was not someone you questioned lightly. She had a way of dodging uncomfortable topics with the precision of a seasoned politician. As I sat there, staring at the photos spread out on my coffee table, I felt a mix of emotions: confusion, anticipation, maybe even a little excitement. This was a side of my father I'd never known, a side that had been hidden from me all these years. I had to find out the truth, no matter what it cost. The note had said as much, and I couldn't ignore it. But as I looked at the last photo, a chill ran down my spine. The little girl in the picture had eyes that looked eerily familiar. In that moment, I realized this was just the beginning. There were layers to this story, layers I wasn't sure I was ready to peel back. But I had no choice. Whatever my father had been hiding, whatever my mother refused to acknowledge, I was going to uncover it. I just hoped I was ready for what I might find. I sat at my kitchen table, the photos spread out in front of me like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle with no picture on the box. My mind kept circling back to that little girl with the familiar eyes. I had to talk to my mother, Lorraine, even though I knew it wouldn't be a walk in the park. That evening, I drove over to my childhood home. The place looked the same, comfortable and unassuming, like a Norman Rockwell painting. But now it felt like a stage set hiding a darker story. Lorraine was in the kitchen, humming to herself as she prepared dinner. The smell of her famous beef stew filled the air, but my appetite was nowhere to be found. "Mom, we need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. "About what, dear?" I placed the photos on the table, watching her face for any sign of recognition or surprise. Instead, she just stared at them, her expression unreadable. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lorraine sighed, a sound heavy with years of unspoken words. "Cal, some things are better left in the past." "Not for me," I replied, a little sharper than I intended. "I need to know." She pushed the photos aside, her fingers trembling slightly. "Your father. He had his reasons. It was a different time." "That's not an answer," I said, frustration creeping into my voice. Nolan walked in just then, his timing impeccable as always. "What's going on?" he asked, glancing between us. "Cal's digging up old ghosts," Lorraine said, her tone dismissive. Nolan looked at me, a silent plea in his eyes. "Maybe we should just let it go, Cal." "Let it go?" I echoed, incredulous. "There's a whole side of Dad's life we never knew about. How can you be okay with that?" Nolan hesitated, his loyalty to our mother evident. "I just think some things don't need to be dragged out into the light." I shook my head, feeling the gap between us widen. "I can't pretend this doesn't matter." Lorraine stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Cal, I love you, but this is not something I can discuss. Please just trust me." Her words hung in the air, a plea wrapped in a command. But I couldn't let it go. Not now, not after everything I'd seen. I nodded, more out of respect than agreement, and left the house, the weight of unsaid words pressing down on me. Back in my car, I gripped the steering wheel, trying to process what had just happened. Lorraine's refusal to talk only fueled my determination. There was more to this story, and I was going to find out what. The next day, I called Tessa, my best friend and the one person who could help me make sense of this mess. We met at our usual spot, a cozy little cafe with the best cinnamon rolls in town. "So, what's got you all twisted up?" Tessa asked, her eyes full of concern. I handed her the photos, watching as she flipped through them. "My dad had a whole other life," I said, the words tasting bitter in my mouth. Tessa looked up, her expression a mix of sympathy and intrigue. "Wow, Cal. This is a lot. Tell me about it," I said, leaning back in my chair. "And Lorraine's not talking." "Maybe you need to look at this from a different angle," Tessa suggested, always the problem solver. "Have you thought about finding that little girl? She could have answers." I nodded, the thought already forming in my mind. "I think she might be my half-sister." Tessa raised an eyebrow, clearly taken aback. "That's huge. Are you ready for that?" "Not really," I admitted. "But I don't have much of a choice." As we talked, a new plan started to take shape. I needed to find Ivy Monroe, the girl in the photos, and see what she knew. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. Later, as I sat in my car, I felt the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Finding Ivy could open a whole new can of worms, but it was a risk I had to take. The truth was out there, tangled up in my father's past, and I was determined to unravel it, no matter where it led. With a deep breath, I started the engine, feeling the road ahead stretch out like a path to the unknown. I had no idea what I would find, but I knew one thing for sure: there was no turning back now. I found myself standing outside Jasper Hale's modest bungalow, my heart pounding against my ribs like a warning drum. Jasper was my father's old friend, and if anyone could shed light on this mess, it was him. I knocked, the sound echoing in the quiet neighborhood. The door creaked open, revealing Jasper's familiar face, weathered by time and stories untold. He looked at me with a mix of surprise and resignation. "Callan," he said, stepping aside to let me in. Inside, the walls were lined with photographs and newspaper clippings, a testament to a life spent chasing stories. I wondered how many of those stories were as tangled as mine. "I need to know about my father," I began, skipping the small talk. "Who was the woman in the photos?" Jasper sighed, a deep, weary sound. "I hoped you wouldn't have to dig this up, but I suppose you deserve the truth." He motioned for me to sit, and I did, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Your father and Ivy's mother, they were close," he said, choosing his words carefully. "She was a big part of his life." I nodded, urging him to continue. "And Ivy?" Jasper hesitated, his gaze drifting to a photo on the wall. "Ivy is your half-sister, Cal. Your father loved her mother, but circumstances kept them apart." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected as much, but hearing it aloud made it real. I tried to process the emotions swirling inside me: betrayal, anger, and a deep, gnawing sadness. "Why didn't Lorraine ever tell us?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your mother had her reasons," Jasper replied, not unkindly. "She wanted to protect you and Nolan from the fallout." I stood up, unable to sit still any longer. "Protect us from what?" "The truth." Jasper didn't answer, and I realized it wasn't his place to justify my mother's choices. I thanked him and left, the sound of the door closing behind me echoing in my ears. As I drove away, I felt the weight of my father's secrets pressing down on me. I needed to find Ivy, to hear her side of the story. But as I reached for my phone to search for her contact information, a thought stopped me cold. What if she didn't want to be found? What if she resented my family as much as I was beginning to resent the lies? I shook off the doubt and dialed the number I'd found online, my heart racing with each ring. Finally, a voice answered, cautious and guarded. Hello? Ivy Monroe? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. This is Callan Rivers. I think we need to talk. There was a pause, long enough for me to wonder if she'd hang up. I've been expecting your call, she said finally, her tone unreadable. Meet me at the coffee shop on Main Street tomorrow. The line went dead, and I sat there, the silence in my car suddenly deafening. Ivy was expecting me. That could mean anything, and none of it was comforting. The next day, I walked into the coffee shop, scanning the room for Ivy. She was sitting in a corner, her eyes fixed on the window. She looked up as I approached, her expression a mix of curiosity and wariness. Callan, she said, not quite a question, but not a statement either. Ivy, I replied, taking a seat across from her. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. So, you're my brother, she said, her voice carrying a hint of disbelief. Half-brother, apparently, I corrected, trying to keep things light, though the weight of the truth was anything but. Ivy studied me, her gaze piercing. What do you want, Callan? I want to know the truth, I said simply. About our father, about us. She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture. I want that too. We talked for what felt like hours, peeling back layers of our shared history. Ivy told me about her mother, about the life she'd lived in the shadow of our father's choices. As I listened, I realized that we were both victims of a story we hadn't written. When we finally parted ways, I felt a strange sense of relief. Ivy wasn't a threat. She was a piece of the puzzle I'd been missing, a link to a past that was slowly coming into focus. But as I walked back to my car, the weight of what lay ahead settled over me. Lorraine's secrets were unraveling, and with them, the fragile piece of our family. I knew the road ahead would be rocky, but I also knew I couldn't turn back. The truth was out there, and I was determined to find it, no matter the cost. I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the photos again, when my phone buzzed with a message from Tessa. Need to talk. The meet at the park, it read. I grabbed my jacket, eager for a distraction from the storm brewing in my head. Park was quiet this time of day, and I found Tessa on our usual bench, her expression serious. What's up? I asked, trying to keep my tone light. She handed me a folded piece of paper. I did some digging. This might help. I unfolded it, revealing an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local woman's sudden death leaves community in shock. Beneath it was a photo of Ivy's mother. My heart sank as I skimmed the article, detailing her unexpected passing years ago. What does this mean? I asked, feeling a chill run down my spine. Tessa looked at me, her eyes searching mine. I think it means there's more to this story than we thought. Maybe Ivy's mother didn't just fade away from your father's life. Maybe something else happened. I nodded, my mind racing. This new information changed everything. If Ivy's mother's death wasn't as straightforward as it seemed, then my father's involvement could be more complicated than I'd imagined. Back at home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. I needed to talk to Lorraine again, but this time I was going to push harder for answers. The next day, I found myself back at my childhood home, the familiar surroundings now tinged with a sense of betrayal. Lorraine was in the living room, flipping through an old photo album. Mom, we need to talk, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, her eyes wary. About what, Callan? I handed her the newspaper clipping, watching her reaction closely. Her face paled, and she set the paper down with trembling hands. Where did you get this? Tessa found it, I replied, not backing down. What aren't you telling me? Lorraine sighed, a sound filled with years of unspoken truths. Your father and Ivy's mother? They were in love, but it was complicated. Her death was unexpected, and it broke him. Was he involved? I asked, the question hanging in the air like a dark cloud. No, she said, her voice firm. But he blamed himself. He always thought he could have done something to prevent it. I watched her, searching for any hint of deception. But all I saw was a mother trying to protect her family. Why didn't you tell us? Because I wanted to shield you from the pain, Lorraine said, her voice cracking. I didn't want you to carry the burden of his choices. I nodded, understanding her motives but still feeling the sting of her secrecy. I need to know everything, Mom. I can't keep living in the dark. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I'll tell you everything, Callan. Just promise me you'll be careful. There are things in the past best left buried. As I left, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. I was finally getting answers, but the truth was more tangled than I'd imagined. Later, I met Ivy again, this time at a small diner on the edge of town. Place was nearly empty, giving us the privacy we needed. I found something, I said, sliding the newspaper clipping across the table. Ivy scanned it, her expression unreadable. I knew she died suddenly, but I never knew the details. Lorraine says our father blamed himself, I said, watching her closely. Do you think there's more to it? Ivy looked up, her eyes meeting mine. I don't know, but I think we need to find out. We sat in silence, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. I realized then that I wasn't just seeking the truth for myself. I was doing it for Ivy too, and for the family we never knew we had. As we parted ways, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I was no longer just unraveling my father's past. I was piecing together a future where Ivy and I could find closure. But as I drove home, a new thought crept in. What if the truth was more dangerous than I'd anticipated? What if uncovering it put us all at risk? The stakes had never been higher, and I knew I had to tread carefully. Past was a powerful thing, and I was about to dive headfirst into its depths, hoping to emerge with the answers we all needed. The days following my last conversation with Lorraine were a blur of restless nights and unanswered questions. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, looking down into a chasm filled with my family's hidden truths. I needed to take the plunge, but I was terrified of what I might find at the bottom. I met up with Nolan at a local bar, hoping for some brotherly advice or at least a distraction. Place was dimly lit, filled with the low hum of conversations and clinking glasses. Nolan was already there, nursing a beer and staring into space. Hey, I said, sliding onto the stool next to him. Hey, he replied, glancing at me with a hint of concern. You look like you've been through the ringer. I shrugged, signaling the bartender for a drink. You could say that. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us like a thick fog. Finally, Nolan spoke, his voice low and hesitant. So, what's going on with Ivy? I took a sip of my drink, feeling the burn of the alcohol steady my nerves. I met her. She's not what I expected. Nolan nodded, his expression thoughtful. And Lorraine? She's finally starting to open up, but there's still so much she's not telling me, I admitted, frustration creeping into my voice. Nolan sighed, running a hand through his hair. You know she's trying to protect us, right? Protect us from what, exactly? I shot back, the words sharper than I intended. The truth? Our own family. Nolan didn't answer, and I realized he was just as caught in this web as I was. We were both trying to navigate a maze with no clear exit. As we left the bar, I felt a strange mix of determination and dread. I needed to talk to Ivy again to see if she could help me piece together the fragments of our father's past. But as I reached for my phone, a message popped up from an unknown number. Stop digging. Some things are better left buried. My heart skipped a beat, a cold sweat breaking out on my skin. I showed the message to Nolan, who frowned, his brow furrowed with concern. What do you think it means? I don't know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But it feels like a warning. The message only fueled my resolve. I couldn't back down now, not when I was so close to the truth. I arranged to meet Ivy again, this time at a quiet spot near the river where we wouldn't be overheard. When I arrived, Ivy was already there, her expression guarded. You got the message too, didn't you? She asked, skipping any pretense of small talk. I nodded, the memory of the words still fresh in my mind. Do you have any idea who it could be from? Ivy shook her head, her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. No, but it means we're onto something. We spent the next hour piecing together everything we knew, trying to form a coherent picture from the scattered pieces of our father's life. As we talked, I realized how much we both needed answers, not just for ourselves but for the families we never knew we had. But just as we were starting to make progress, Ivy's phone buzzed with another message. She read it, her face going pale. "It's my mother's old contact," she said, her voice trembling. "Someone's using it to send these warnings." The revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Our pursuit of the truth had stirred up something, or someone, intent on keeping the past hidden. I looked at Ivy, seeing the fear mirrored in her eyes, and knew we had to be careful. As we parted ways, I felt the weight of the decision looming over me. I could keep pushing, risk everything to uncover the truth, or I could step back, protect what little peace we had left. But deep down, I knew I couldn't walk away. The stakes were too high and the cost of ignorance too great. I drove home, the road blurring before me as I grappled with the enormity of what lay ahead. My perception of justice and revenge was shifting, the lines between them blurring as I delved deeper into my father's past. In seeking the truth, I was also seeking redemption, not just for him but for myself and the family we were trying to rebuild. The journey was far from over, and I had no idea what I would find at the end. But one thing was certain, I couldn't stop now. Not when the truth was so close, and the past was finally ready to reveal its secrets. The day of the family gathering arrived, and I felt like I was walking into a storm with no umbrella. Ivy had agreed to come, but the tension between us was palpable. My mind was a whirlpool of anxiety and dread, knowing that this confrontation could either tear us apart or finally bring us the closure we needed. As we arrived at Lorraine's house, Ivy's grip on her purse tightened. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice barely masking her apprehension. "No," I admitted, "but we need to do this." The door opened, and Lorraine greeted us with a smile that quickly faded as she saw Ivy. Her eyes widened, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear. "Callan, what's going on?" "Ivy's here because she deserves to know the truth," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me. Nolan appeared in the hallway, his expression one of confusion and concern. "Cal, what's happening?" I took a deep breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "Ivy is our sister, Nolan. Our father's daughter." The room fell silent, the air thick with unspoken emotions. Lorraine's face was a mask of shock, and Nolan looked like he'd been hit by a freight train. "I didn't want it to come out like this," Lorraine said, her voice trembling. "I was trying to protect you." "Protect us from what?" I asked, my frustration boiling over. "The truth." Ivy stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I just want to understand where I come from." Lorraine's eyes softened, but the tension remained. "I knew about you, Ivy. I knew about your mother. We were friends once, but things got complicated." Nolan looked between us, his loyalty torn. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "I thought it was best to keep it buried," Lorraine said, tears glistening in her eyes. "I didn't want you to suffer because of your father's mistakes." The room felt like it was closing in on me, the walls pressing tighter with every word. I had brought Ivy here seeking answers, but all I found were more questions, more tangled threads in a web I couldn't unravel. Just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I glanced at the screen, my heart sinking as I read the message. "You've gone too far. Stop now or face the consequences." I showed the message to Ivy, her face paling as she read it. "Who's doing this?" she whispered, fear creeping into her voice. "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the ground shift beneath me. "But we're not safe." The realization hit me like a tidal wave. Whoever was behind these threats wasn't going to stop until we backed down. But backing down wasn't an option, not anymore. Ivy and I left the house, leaving Lorraine and Nolan to grapple with the fallout. As we walked down the street, the weight of the world pressing on our shoulders, I felt like I was teetering on the edge of a cliff. "We can't give up," Ivy said, her voice resolute despite everything. "I know," I replied, though the words felt hollow. "But I don't know what to do next." As we parted ways, I felt a sense of hopelessness settle over me. The truth was within reach, but the cost of uncovering it seemed higher than ever. My ideas of revenge and justice were crumbling under the weight of reality, and I was left questioning everything I thought I knew. Back home, I sat in the dark, the silence deafening. I was at my lowest point, the path ahead obscured by shadows and uncertainty. But somewhere in the depths of my despair, a flicker of determination sparked. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions. I had to keep pushing, keep fighting for the truth, no matter what it cost. The stakes had never been higher, and the risks were mounting. But I knew one thing for certain: I wasn't alone. Ivy and I were in this together, and together we would find a way to bring the past into the light, no matter how dark the journey became. The night of the confrontation felt charged with electricity, the air thick with anticipation and fear. I stood outside Lorraine's house, my heart pounding like a war drum. Ivy was beside me, her expression a mix of determination and apprehension. We were about to face the past head-on, and there was no turning back. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Lorraine sat in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Nolan hovered nearby, his face a mask of conflict. The room was silent, the only sound the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. I took a deep breath, stepping forward. "Mom, we need to talk," I began, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Lorraine looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "Callan, please, let's not do this here." "No," I said firmly. "We've been running from this for too long. It's time to face it." Ivy stepped forward, her voice calm but resolute. "I deserve to know the truth, Lorraine. About my mother, about our father." Lorraine's eyes flickered with a mix of emotions, fear, regret, and something else I couldn't quite place. "I was trying to protect you all," she said, her voice breaking. "By keeping secrets?" I challenged, feeling the weight of years of deception pressing down on us. "We deserve to know the truth, even if it's painful." Nolan stepped in, his tone conciliatory. "Mom, we're not here to hurt you. We just want to understand." The silence stretched, heavy and oppressive, until Lorraine finally spoke. "Your father loved Ivy's mother. They were planning to be together, but then she died and everything fell apart." Ivy's face was a mask of shock, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I was afraid," Lorraine admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid of what it would do to our family." The room was silent again, the weight of Lorraine's words settling over us like a shroud. I felt a mix of anger and empathy, understanding her motives but still grappling with the consequences of her choices. Just as I was about to speak, the doorbell rang, its sound slicing through the tension like a knife. We all turned, confusion etched on our faces. Nolan opened the door, revealing Jasper Hale standing there, his expression grave. "I think it's time we all had a talk," he said, stepping inside. Jasper's presence was unexpected but somehow fitting. He had been a part of this story from the beginning, and now he was here to help us find closure. "I've been keeping something from you," Jasper said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your father didn't just love Ivy's mother. He was trying to protect her from someone." The room went still, the implications of Jasper's words sinking in. "Who?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Jasper hesitated, his eyes meeting Lorraine's. "Someone who didn't want their relationship to succeed. Someone who had a lot to lose if the truth came out." Lorraine's face turned pale, and for a moment I saw a flicker of fear in her eyes. "I didn't know," she said, her voice trembling. "I swear I didn't know." Truth hit me like a tidal wave. Our father's love for Ivy's mother had been a threat to someone who had gone to great lengths to keep them apart. The warnings we'd received, the threats, it all made sense now. Ivy looked at me, her eyes filled with a mix of anger and determination. "We need to find out who's behind this," I nodded, the path ahead suddenly clear. We had to keep digging, keep fighting for the truth, no matter what it cost. As we stood there, united in our resolve, I felt a sense of closure beginning to form. We were finally facing the truth, and though the journey was far from over, we were no longer alone. Core themes of revenge and justice had brought us to this moment, forcing us to confront the past and find a way forward. And as we prepared to face whatever lay ahead, I knew that together we could overcome anything. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of emotions and revelations. Ivy and I spent hours piecing together the fragments of our father's past, the puzzle slowly forming a picture that, while not perfect, was clearer than before. We'd unearthed truths that had been buried for too long, and now it was time to see what we could build from the rubble. I found myself back at Lorraine's house, the familiar surroundings now tinged with a sense of hope. Lorraine sat at the kitchen table, her expression a mix of apprehension and resolve. Nolan was beside her, his presence a steadying force. "Thank you for coming," Lorraine said, her voice soft but steady. I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "We need to talk about where we go from here." Lorraine glanced at Nolan, then back at me. "I want to make things right for all of us." Ivy arrived a few moments later, her entrance quiet but significant. She took a seat beside me, her presence a reminder of the journey we'd shared. "I've found something," she said, placing an envelope on the table. The envelope was worn, the paper yellowed with age. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was Ivy's mother's. Lorraine's eyes widened as she picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. "Dear Lorraine," she read aloud, her voice catching on the words. "I hope this letter finds you well. I know things have been difficult, but I want you to know that I never intended to come between you and your family. I hope one day we can find a way to heal." The room was silent as Lorraine finished reading, the weight of the letter settling over us. It was a message of regret, but also of hope, a hope that we could find a way to move forward together. Lorraine looked up, tears in her eyes. I had no idea she felt this way. I'd been holding on to so much anger, and it blinded me to what really mattered. Ivy reached across the table, placing her hand over Lorraine's. "We can't change the past, but we can choose how we move forward." In that moment, I saw the possibility of reconciliation, the chance to build something new from the ashes of the past. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a start. As we talked, the conversation turned to our father, his choices, and the legacy he'd left behind. We didn't have all the answers, but we had each other, and that was enough. Later, as I stood outside with Ivy, I felt a sense of closure beginning to take root. "Do you think we'll ever know the whole story?" she asked, her gaze thoughtful. "Maybe not," I admitted, "but we've come this far. That has to count for something." We stood in silence, the weight of the journey behind us and the promise of a new beginning ahead. The themes of revenge and justice had brought us to this point, forcing us to confront the past and find a way forward. And while some questions remained unanswered, the path ahead felt brighter. As Ivy and I parted ways, I felt a newfound sense of peace. I had come searching for the truth, and while the journey had been fraught with challenges, it had also brought me closer to my family. We were no longer defined by the secrets of the past, but by the bonds we were forging in the present. As I drove home, the road stretching out before me like a promise of new beginnings, I felt a sense of gratitude for the journey we'd undertaken. Past would always be a part of us, but it no longer held the power to dictate our future. And as I pulled into my driveway, I couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead. The story of our family was still being written, and while the path was uncertain, I knew we would face it together, united by the truths we'd uncovered and the hope of what was yet to come. I was sitting in the doctor's office, tapping my foot against the cold linoleum floor, waiting for the results of what I thought was just a routine checkup. The air was thick with that sterile antiseptic smell that always made me feel slightly on edge. The door swung open and Dr. Patel walked in, her expression warm but serious. "Lila," she said, settling into her chair. "I have some news that might come as a surprise." I braced myself, suddenly aware of the tightness in my chest. "Okay, hit me with it." You're pregnant. The words hung in the air, echoing in my mind like a bell tolling in the distance. Pregnant. I was pregnant. I felt a rush of emotions, joy, fear, confusion, all crashing into each other like waves in a storm. I'd always wanted to be a mother, but Caleb and I had talked about waiting a few more years. I could already hear his voice, cool and dismissive, echoing in my head. I thanked Dr. Patel, my mind spinning as I left the office. The drive home was a blur, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little too tightly. I kept glancing at my reflection in the rearview mirror, searching for some sign of change, some clue that my life had just shifted on its axis. When I walked into our apartment, Caleb was sprawled on the couch, his laptop balanced on his knees. He looked up, his eyes flickering with the briefest hint of curiosity before settling back into their usual indifference. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We need to talk." "Can it wait?" he asked, not bothering to look up this time. "I'm in the middle of something." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. "No, it can't wait," he sighed, closing the laptop with a pointed click. "All right, what's up?" "I'm pregnant." For a moment there was silence. Then a slow, creeping smile spread across his face, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Wow, that's unexpected." "Unexpected," I echoed, feeling a knot of frustration tighten in my chest. "Is that all you have to say?" He shrugged, leaning back into the couch. "I mean, we talked about this, Lila. We agreed it wasn't the right time." "I know," I replied, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and vulnerability. "But life doesn't always go according to plan." Caleb stood up, running a hand through his hair, his expression unreadable. "This changes everything, you know. We'll have to rethink our plans, maybe even put some things on hold." I watched him, feeling the first pangs of isolation creeping in. This was supposed to be a moment of shared excitement, a step forward in our lives together. Instead, it felt like I was standing on the edge of a chasm, and Caleb was already turning away. "Do you even want this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He hesitated, and that pause spoke louder than any words could. "I just need some time to think." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Yeah, okay." As Caleb disappeared into the bedroom, I sank onto the couch, staring at the blank television screen. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, but one thing was clear: I was in this alone, at least for now. Later that night, as I lay in bed, listening to Caleb's steady breathing beside me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between us. A crack had appeared in the foundation of our marriage, and I had no idea how to fix it. I closed my eyes, trying to find some comfort in the darkness, but all I could see was the uncertain future stretching out before me. I had to be strong, not just for myself, but for the life growing inside me. Caleb would have to come around eventually, right? But as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't help but wonder, what if he didn't? What if this was just the beginning of something much bigger, something I wasn't prepared for? Questions swirled in my mind, unresolved and persistent, as I slipped into a restless sleep, leaving me with a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. The morning after my conversation with Caleb, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, scrutinizing the faint lines around my eyes. I felt older, somehow, as if the weight of the news had etched itself into my skin overnight. I needed to tell Eleanor, Caleb's mother. She was the kind of woman who liked to know everything about her family, preferably before anyone else did. I called her that afternoon, my stomach fluttering with nerves. Eleanor picked up on the second ring, her voice crisp and expectant. "Lila, dear, what a surprise. To what do I owe this pleasure?" "Hi, Eleanor. I have some news I thought you'd want to hear directly from me." "Oh." Her tone was polite but edged with curiosity, like a cat that had just caught sight of a mouse. "I'm pregnant." There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine her expression, eyebrows raised. Lips pursed in that familiar way she had when she was trying to mask her true feelings. "Well, that's certainly unexpected," she finally said, echoing Caleb's sentiments from the night before. Have you and Caleb discussed how this will impact his career? His career. Of course, it always came back to that. We're working through it, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Good. It's important to stay focused on what matters. A baby is a big responsibility, Lila, and I hope you're prepared for that. I am, I said, trying not to let her words sting. We both are. We hung up soon after, the conversation leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. I felt more alone than ever, caught between Caleb's indifference and Eleanor's thinly veiled criticism. I needed to clear my head, so I decided to meet Zoe for coffee. Zoe greeted me with a hug that was warm and reassuring. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said, pulling back to study my face. I managed a weak smile. I think I'm living with one. We sat down and I filled her in on everything. Caleb's reaction, Eleanor's cold reception. Zoe listened intently, her eyes narrowing with every word. That's just like them, she said, shaking her head. Always so focused on themselves. What about you, Lila? How are you holding up? I shrugged, staring into my coffee. I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's hard when it feels like I'm the only one who cares. Zoe reached across the table, giving my hand a squeeze. You're not alone. I'm here and I'll help you through this. Her words were a balm, soothing the raw edges of my anxiety. But as we talked, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was brewing beneath the surface, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. A few days later, I decided to cut back on my hours at work. I hoped it would give me more time to focus on my health and maybe, just maybe, ease some of the tension at home. When I told Caleb, he looked at me like I'd suggested we sell the house and move to Mars. You're cutting back? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. Isn't that a bit premature? I thought it might help, I said, trying to keep my tone light. Less stress for both of us. He shook his head, a disapproving frown creasing his forehead. It just seems like you're giving up, Lila. We need to be strong right now. The irony of his words was not lost on me. I'm trying to be strong, I replied, biting back the urge to say more. I just thought. Maybe think a little less, he interrupted, his tone sharp. We've got enough on our plates. I nodded, swallowing my retort. It was easier than starting another argument, especially when I knew it would lead nowhere. But his words lingered, gnawing at my resolve. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something. Caleb had been distracted lately, more so than usual. And then there was Eleanor's cryptic comment about his career. It was like I was piecing together a puzzle, but half the pieces were missing. The next morning, as Caleb left for work, I noticed something odd. His phone, usually glued to his side, was left charging on the kitchen counter. It was a small thing, but it struck me as unusual. I picked it up, hesitating for a moment. Then, driven by a mix of curiosity and something deeper, I unlocked it. What I found was unexpected. A message from an unknown number, signed with a single initial, M. Looking forward to tonight. Can't wait to see you. M. My heart raced as I stared at the screen, the implications sinking in. This was more than just a crack in the foundation. It was a chasm, threatening to swallow everything I thought I knew. I put the phone down, my hands trembling. This was the twist I hadn't seen coming, a revelation that turned my world upside down. I had to know the truth, and I had to know it now. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind replaying the message from Caleb's phone over and over. The initial shock had worn off, leaving behind a simmering anger that I couldn't quite shake. I knew I had to act, but I wasn't sure how. That's when I decided to call Ian, my detective friend. Ian picked up on the first ring, his voice steady and reassuring. Lila, what's up? I need your help, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. I think Caleb's cheating on me. There was a pause, then Ian's voice came back, calm and professional. Tell me everything. I recounted the late nights, the secretive behavior, and finally the message. Ian listened without interrupting, letting me get it all out. Do you want me to look into it? He asked once I'd finished. Yes, I replied, my resolve hardening with each word. I need to know the truth. All right, I'll see what I can find. After hanging up, I felt a small sense of relief. Ian was good at what he did, and if there was something to uncover, he'd find it. But as the day wore on, my relief turned to anxiety. What if Caleb found out? What if I was wrong? That evening, Caleb came home later than usual, his tie askew and his eyes tired. He barely glanced at me as he walked past, heading straight for the shower. I watched him go, my heart heavy with unanswered questions. When he finally emerged, I decided to test the waters. Long day? I asked, trying to sound casual. Yeah, he replied, rubbing his neck. Lots of meetings. Anything interesting? I pressed, searching his face for any hint of deception. Not really, he said, his eyes flicking away from mine. Just the usual. I nodded, biting back the urge to confront him. Instead, I turned back to my book, pretending to read while my mind raced with possibilities. The next few days passed in a tense blur. Caleb's behavior didn't change. If anything, he seemed more distant, more preoccupied. I kept waiting for Ian to call, each ring of the phone sending my heart into overdrive. Finally, the call came. Ian's voice was low, almost apologetic. Lila, I found something. My stomach dropped. What is it? He's been seeing someone, Ian said, his words careful and measured. Her name's Marissa Lane. They've been meeting at a hotel downtown. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Marissa. The initial from the message. It was all real, and it was worse than I'd imagined. Thank you, Ian, I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you want me to keep digging? He asked, his tone gentle. No, I replied, my mind made up. I've heard enough. After hanging up, I sat in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. I needed to confront Caleb, but the thought of it filled me with dread. How could he do this to us? To me? That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling as Caleb slept beside me. My mind was a whirlwind of anger and betrayal, but beneath it all was a deeper, more unsettling question. What was I going to do now? The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity. I needed to talk to Zoe. She'd always been my rock, and I knew she'd help me figure out my next steps. We met at a small cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and a chalkboard menu. Zoe listened as I recounted Ian's findings, her expression growing darker with each word. That bastard, she said, her voice low and fierce. I knew he was trouble. What do he do, Zoe? I asked, feeling more lost than ever. You confront him, she replied, her eyes blazing with determination. You deserve answers, Lila. I nodded, taking comfort in her unwavering support. But as I left the cafe, a new thought occurred to me. What if confronting Caleb wasn't enough? What if I needed to do more to protect myself and my future? The idea of revenge flickered in the back of my mind, a dangerous temptation that I couldn't quite ignore. I'd always believed in justice, in doing what was right. But this situation was testing everything I thought I knew. As I walked home, I realized that my understanding of justice was evolving. It wasn't just about getting answers or confronting Caleb. It was about reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my sense of self. And if that meant taking drastic measures, then so be it. With each step, I felt a new resolve building within me. Caleb had made his choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let him control my life any longer. I spent the next few days in a fog, my mind replaying the conversation with Ian and the images it conjured of Caleb and Marissa together. The betrayal was a living thing, gnawing at my insides and making it hard to focus on anything else. I knew I had to confront Caleb, but the thought filled me with dread. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, Caleb walked in, his face a mask of practiced normalcy. I watched him from the corner of my eye, my heart pounding in my chest. It was time. Caleb, I said, setting the knife down with a deliberate clatter. We need to talk. He paused, a hint of irritation flashing across his face. Can it wait? I've had a long day. No, it can't, I replied, my voice firm. I know about Marissa. Color drained from his face, leaving him looking pale and exposed. For a moment, he said nothing, just stared at me as if I'd slapped him. I don't know what you're talking about, he finally said, his voice tight. Don't lie to me, Caleb, I said, crossing my arms over my chest. I've seen the messages. I know about the hotel. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. It's not what you think, he said at last, but the words rang hollow. Then tell me what it is, I challenged, my anger bubbling to the surface. He hesitated, the silence stretching between us like a chasm. It's complicated, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Complicated? I echoed, my heart aching with the weight of his betrayal. You're cheating on me, Caleb. There's nothing complicated about that. He ran a hand through his hair, his frustration palpable. I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. I shook my head, disbelief coursing through me. That's not good enough. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by a hard, defensive edge. We can work through this, he said, his voice taking on a pleading tone. We can fix it. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the kitchen walls. Fix it? How do you fix something like this, Caleb? He took a step toward me, his hands outstretched. I'll end it with Marissa. I promise. I studied him, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe him, to cling to the hope that we could somehow salvage our marriage. But another part of me, the part that had grown stronger with each new revelation, knew that it wasn't enough. I need time, I said, stepping back. Time to think. He nodded, relief washing over his face. Of course. Take all the time you need. As he left the room, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a flicker of something else. Empowerment. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was in control of my own life. The next day, I met with Zoe again, needing her perspective to help me sort through the chaos. We sat on a park bench, the autumn leaves swirling around us like confetti. So, what's the plan? Zoe asked, her eyes sharp and focused. I don't know, I admitted, staring at the ground. Part of me wants to fight for this, for us. But another part of me is just done. Zoe nodded, her expression thoughtful. You have to do what's right for you, Lila. Not for him, not for anyone else. I know, I said, my voice barely a whisper. But it's not that simple. She reached over, squeezing my hand. You're stronger than you think. Whatever you decide, I'll be here. As we sat there, a new thought began to take shape in my mind. Maybe this wasn't just about Caleb's betrayal. Maybe it was about something bigger. About reclaiming my life, my happiness, and my sense of self-worth. The idea of revenge still lingered, but it was shifting, evolving into something else. Maybe the best revenge wasn't about hurting Caleb or Marissa. Maybe it was about finding my own path, one that didn't involve them. With that realization, I felt a sense of clarity, a new determination to take control of my future. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let Caleb or anyone else dictate my life any longer. Conference was being held at a sleek hotel on the outskirts of town, its glass facade glinting in the afternoon sun. As I approached, my heart pounded with a mix of dread and determination. I had to see it for myself, to confront Caleb and Marissa in their deceit. I slipped through the lobby, my footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The elevator ride to the conference floor felt interminable, each ding marking a step closer to a confrontation I wasn't sure I was ready for. When the doors finally opened, I hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath to steady myself. I could hear the murmur of voices and the clinking of glasses from the reception area. I moved forward, scanning the room for Caleb. And then I saw them. Caleb and Marissa stood together, their heads bent close in conversation. They were laughing, oblivious to the world around them. My heart twisted painfully at the sight, the reality of their betrayal hitting me like a physical blow. I walked over, my steps purposeful, my resolve hardening with each stride. Caleb looked up as I approached, his smile freezing on his face. Marissa turned, her expression shifting from surprise to something more calculating. "Lila," Caleb said, his voice tinged with a nervous edge. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Marissa's eyes flickered with something like amusement. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us, Lila." "I wasn't invited," I said, my gaze fixed on Caleb. "But I thought I'd drop by and see what you've been up to." Caleb shifted uncomfortably, his hands slipping into his pockets. "Lila, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I asked, my voice rising. "Because it looks like you're here with her, not at a conference." Marissa smirked, her voice dripping with feigned innocence. "Caleb, maybe we should tell her the truth." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What truth?" Caleb hesitated, his eyes darting to Marissa before returning to me. "I was going to tell you, Lila. Tell me what?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. Marissa stepped forward, her expression triumphant. "Caleb and I are planning to be together. After the baby is born, he's leaving you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut, my breath catching in my throat. "Is that true, Caleb?" He looked away, his silence more damning than any words could have been. I felt a surge of anger, my vision blurring with unshed tears. "You coward," I spat, my voice trembling with rage. "You couldn't even tell me yourself." Caleb opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, cutting him off. "Save it. I've heard enough." I turned on my heel, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. As I left the room, I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look back. I couldn't. I needed to get out of there, to clear my head. I found myself outside, the cool air a balm against my heated skin. I walked aimlessly, my thoughts racing. I'd known Caleb was unfaithful, but hearing him confirm it, hearing their plans for the future, was a blow I hadn't anticipated. I stopped by a park bench, sinking down onto the worn wood. My mind was a jumble of anger, betrayal, and something else, relief. In a way, their admission had freed me. I no longer had to pretend, to hope for something that was never going to happen. But as I sat there, another thought occurred to me. What if this wasn't just about Caleb and Marissa? What if there was more at stake? The idea of revenge flickered in the back of my mind, a dangerous temptation that I couldn't quite ignore. I pulled out my phone, my fingers trembling as I dialed Zoe's number. She picked up almost immediately, her voice a lifeline in the chaos. "Lila, what's wrong?" "I need your help," I said, my voice steady despite the tumult inside. "I need to figure out how to protect myself." Zoe was silent for a moment, then her voice came back, firm and reassuring. "Whatever you need, I'm here." As I hung up, I felt a new resolve building within me. Caleb and Marissa had made their choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wouldn't let them dictate my life any longer. It was time to take control, to fight back, and to reclaim what was rightfully mine. With that thought in mind, I stood up, my path clear before me. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The days after the conference were a blur of raw emotions and sleepless nights. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a precipice, the ground crumbling beneath my feet. The betrayal, the lies, it was all too much. I was barely holding it together, the weight of it all pressing down on me. One morning, I woke up feeling off, a dull ache in my abdomen that I couldn't ignore. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just stress. But as the day wore on, the pain intensified, sharp and unrelenting. I knew something was wrong. I called Zoe in a panic, my voice trembling as I explained what was happening. She insisted on taking me to the hospital, her concern palpable over the phone. Within minutes, she was at my door, her face a mask of worry. The hospital, the sterile white walls, and the hum of machinery did little to calm my nerves. The doctor's expression was grave as he delivered the news. I was losing the baby. The words hit me like a sledgehammer, knocking the breath from my lungs. I felt a numbness spread through me, a cold detachment that belied the turmoil inside. Zoe held my hand, her eyes filled with unshed tears, but I couldn't cry. I couldn't feel anything at all. As I lay there, the reality of my situation crashed over me in waves. I had lost the baby, and with it, the last thread of hope that had been holding me together. Caleb's betrayal, the end of our marriage, it all seemed insurmountable now. When I finally returned home, the apartment felt different, empty and foreign. I wandered through the rooms, touching the familiar objects that now seemed to belong to someone else. I found myself in the nursery, the room we'd never gotten around to decorating. It was a stark reminder of everything I'd lost. Caleb came home later that evening, his face drawn and weary. I could see the guilt etched into his features, but I couldn't bring myself to care. We sat across from each other, the silence heavy and oppressive. "I heard about the baby," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to find the words. "I'm sorry, Lila. I never meant for any of this to happen." His apology rang hollow, a meaningless gesture that did nothing to ease the pain. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man I'd once loved, now a stranger. "I don't know what to say, Caleb," I replied, my voice flat. "It's too late for sorry." He reached for my hand, but I pulled away, the distance between us insurmountable. "I'm leaving," I said, the decision crystallizing in my mind. "I can't do this anymore." His eyes widened, panic flickering across his face. "Lila, wait. We can work through this." "We can." "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "We can't. You made your choice, and now I'm making mine." As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of calm, a clarity that had been absent for so long. I was done fighting for something that was never going to work. It was time to let go, to find my own path. The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and goodbyes. Zoe was a constant presence, her support unwavering as I prepared to leave the life I'd known. As I packed the last of my things, I found a letter tucked into one of Caleb's drawers. It was from Marissa, detailing plans to exploit Eleanor's finances to fund their new life together. The revelation was a final, bitter blow, confirming everything I'd feared about Caleb's intentions. I knew I had to tell Eleanor, to warn her before it was too late. I met Eleanor at a quiet cafe, the air thick with unspoken tension. She looked at me with a mixture of skepticism and concern, her eyes searching mine for answers. "What's this about, Lila?" she asked, her voice sharp. I slid the letter across the table, watching as her expression shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Caleb and Marissa are planning to use your assets to fund their life together," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. She stared at the letter, her hands trembling. "I can't believe this," she murmured, her voice breaking. "My own son." "I'm sorry, Eleanor," I said, reaching out to touch her hand. "I thought you should know." As we sat there, a new understanding passed between us, a bond forged in shared betrayal. I realized then that my ideas of revenge had shifted. It wasn't about getting even, it was about protecting those who still mattered. As I left the cafe, I felt a sense of closure. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I was ready to face it. I had lost so much, but I had also found something invaluable, myself. And that was a start. Confrontation with Eleanor had left me drained, but it had also given me a sense of purpose. I knew what I had to do next. The truth about Caleb and Marissa's plans was out in the open, and it was time to face them both head-on. I decided to meet Caleb at our apartment, the place that had once been a home and now felt like a battleground. I waited for him to return, the silence of the room pressing in on me as I rehearsed what I would say. My heart was a drumbeat of anxiety and determination. When Caleb finally walked through the door, his expression was a mixture of surprise and apprehension. He must have sensed that something was different, that I was different. "Lila," he said, setting his briefcase down. "What's going on?" I stood up, meeting his gaze with a steadiness I hadn't felt in months. "We need to talk." He nodded, a wary look in his eyes. "All right." I took a deep breath, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I know about your plan with Marissa. To use Eleanor's money." His face blanched, the color draining away like water from a sieve. Save it," I interrupted, my voice sharp. "I've already told Eleanor." His eyes widened, panic flickering across his features. "You did what?" "You heard me," I said, crossing my arms. "I told her everything." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, his movements agitated. "Lila, you don't understand." "No, Caleb." "You don't understand," I snapped, my voice rising. "You've been lying and manipulating everyone around you." "And for what?" "To run off with Marissa." He opened his mouth to protest, but I cut him off again. "I've lost everything because of you. The baby, our marriage, my trust. And now you want to destroy your mother's life too." Caleb's shoulders slumped, a defeated look settling over him. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. Yet here we are," I said, my voice softer now, but no less firm. "It's over, Caleb. You've lost everything." He looked at me, really looked at me, and for a moment I saw a flicker of the man I'd once loved. But it was too late for regrets, too late for apologies. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice hollow. "I want you to leave," I said, the words coming out with a finality that surprised even me. "I want you to leave and never come back." He nodded, a resigned acceptance in his eyes. "All right." As he turned to go, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and a newfound sense of freedom. This was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. But just as he reached the door, it swung open to reveal Marissa, her expression one of smug satisfaction. "I see you've finally grown a backbone, Lila," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. I bristled at her words, my anger flaring anew. "And I see you're still as deluded as ever, Marissa." She laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Oh, please. Caleb was never yours to keep." "Maybe not," I replied, taking a step forward, my gaze steady. "But he's not yours either." "Not anymore." Marissa's smile faltered, a flash of uncertainty crossing her face. "What do you mean?" "I mean that it's over," I said, my voice ringing with conviction. "You've both lost." Caleb looked between us, his face a mask of confusion and regret. "Marissa, maybe we should." "No," she snapped, her eyes flashing. "We're not done here." "Yes, we are," I said, my voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You can't manipulate your way out of this one, Marissa. It's time to face the consequences." As the words left my mouth, I saw the realization dawn on her face, the understanding that her plans had crumbled. She turned to Caleb, her expression pleading. "Caleb, we can still." But he shook his head, a weary resignation in his eyes. "No, Marissa. It's over." With that, he walked past her, out the door, leaving her standing there, alone and defeated. I watched him go, a sense of closure settling over me. Marissa looked at me, her bravado gone, replaced by a hollow vulnerability. "You think you've won, Lila?" I shook my head, a small smile playing on my lips. "This was never about winning. It was about doing what's right." As she left, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Confrontation had been painful but necessary. I had faced my greatest challenge and come through stronger for it. Standing there in the quiet aftermath, I understood that justice wasn't about revenge. It was about finding peace, about reclaiming my life and moving forward. And for the first time in a long while, I felt ready to do just that. The days following the confrontation were a whirlwind of change and reflection. I moved into a small apartment, a cozy space that felt like a fresh start. It was a blank canvas, waiting for me to fill it with new memories and new beginnings. I spent my mornings at the school, finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of my work. Helping others navigate their challenges gave me a sense of purpose, a reminder that life continued to move forward no matter how heavy the past. Eleanor reached out to me a few days later. We met at a small cafe, the same one where I'd shown her the letter. This time, the atmosphere was different, less tense, more hopeful. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," Eleanor began, her voice steady but soft. "About Caleb and Marissa." I nodded, waiting for her to continue. "I've decided to cut Caleb off financially," she said, her eyes meeting mine with a resolute determination. "He needs to learn that actions have consequences." I felt a surge of relief and gratitude. "Thank you, Eleanor. I know that wasn't easy." She sighed, a hint of sadness in her smile. "It's the right thing to do." "I see that now." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping our coffee. Then Eleanor reached across the table, her hand covering mine. "I'm sorry, Lila. For everything. I should have seen what was happening sooner." Her apology was unexpected, and it touched me deeply. "We all make mistakes," I said, squeezing her hand. "The important thing is what we do next." She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I'm proud of you, Lila. You've shown incredible strength." As we parted ways, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Eleanor's support meant more than I'd realized, and it marked a new chapter in our relationship, one built on mutual respect and understanding. Back at my apartment, I found Zoe waiting for me, a bottle of wine in hand. "Thought you could use a drink," she said with a grin. I laughed, grateful for her unwavering friendship. "You know me too well." We settled onto the couch, the wine flowing and our conversation easy and light. Zoe's presence was a balm, her laughter infectious and comforting. "So, what's next for you?" she asked, her eyes curious and supportive. I leaned back, considering her question. "I don't know," I admitted. "But for the first time, I'm okay with that. I'm just going to take it one day at a time." Zoe nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Sounds like a plan." As the evening wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey I'd been through. The betrayal, the loss, the confrontation, it had all been painful, but it had also led me to this moment. A moment where I felt stronger, more self-assured, and ready to embrace whatever came next. The resolution wasn't perfect. There were still loose ends and unanswered questions. Caleb and Marissa were out of my life, but their shadows lingered, reminders of the past that had shaped me. Yet I knew that I was no longer defined by them. I was free to carve my own path, to find my own happiness. As I lay in bed that night, the city lights casting a gentle glow through the window, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had faced my fears, confronted the people who had hurt me, and emerged on the other side stronger for it. And as I drifted off to sleep, a lingering thought crossed my mind, a subtle twist to the resolution. What if Caleb and Marissa's downfall was just the beginning? What if their actions had set off a chain of events that would ripple through their lives, forcing them to confront their own demons? The thought was both unsettling and oddly satisfying, a reminder that justice and karma had their own way of unfolding. Whatever happened next, I was ready to face it with courage and resilience. In the end, my journey had been about more than revenge or justice. It had been about finding myself, about learning to value my own needs and desires. And as I closed my eyes, I knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with hope, possibility, and the promise of a brighter future.
I never expected betrayal to smell like lavender. That's what hit me first when I walked into our bedroom that evening. The overwhelming scent of my mother-in-law's signature perfume lingering in a space where it had no business being. My name is Lila, and until I found that note on my pillow, I thought I had everything figured out. Career on track, marriage solid, future bright. It's funny how a single piece of paper can shatter that illusion. The note itself was simple, written in Marjorie's unmistakable cursive. Some wives deserve what's coming to them. M.E. I stood there, holding the paper, while my hands started to shake. The house was quiet except for the distant sound of Ethan in the shower. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you notice things, like how the throw pillows on our bed were slightly misaligned. or how my bedside drawer wasn't fully closed. "Hey babe," Ethan called out from the bathroom. "Didn't expect you home so early. How was the merger meeting?" I quickly folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. "It went fine," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Ethan, has your mother been here today?" The water shut off. There was a pause, just a beat too long. "Mom? No, why would she be?" I opened my bedside drawer. My personal planner was slightly out of place, and when I flipped through it, I could see faint fingerprints on pages detailing my upcoming business trips and meetings. Ethan emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, water dripping from his hair. He used to look at me with such warmth. Now, I caught something else in his eyes. Guilt? Concern? "You're sure about that?" I pressed, watching his face carefully. "Because I can smell her perfume in here." He laughed, but it sounded forced. "Come on, Lila. You're being paranoid. Mom's probably still upset about us missing Sunday dinner, but she wouldn't just show up here." "Really? Like she wouldn't just show up at my office last week to remind me about family obligations?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "She's just worried about us. About our future. Maybe if you weren't so focused on work." "Don't." I cut him off. "Don't make this about my job again." My phone buzzed, a text from Naomi. "Emergency wine night needed? Just closed a sale near you." I looked at Ethan, still standing there, water creating a small puddle at his feet. The man I married 5 years ago would have been outraged at the idea of his mother going through our things. This version just looked tired. "I'm going out," I said, grabbing my purse. "And when I get back, we need to talk about boundaries." "Lila, wait." He reached for my arm, but I was already moving past him. "And change the sheets," I called over my shoulder. "They smell like lavender." As I drove to meet Naomi, my mind raced. The note wasn't just a threat, it was a declaration of war. Marjorie had always made it clear she thought I was wrong for her precious son. Too ambitious. Too independent. Not the traditional wife she'd envisioned. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Victor, my boss. "Outstanding work on the merger presentation. Board wants to fast-track the expansion. Need you to lead the new division. Details tomorrow." I smiled despite everything. The promotion I'd been working toward was finally within reach. But as I pulled into the wine bar's parking lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to face an impossible choice: my career or my marriage. Naomi was waiting outside, 2 glasses of red already in hand. One look at my face and she said, "Oh, honey, what did the witch do now?" I pulled out the note and handed it to her. "Declared war," I replied. "And I think my husband might be on her side." 3 days after finding the note, I walked into my office to find Victor waiting for me, holding a stack of merger documents. The expression on his face made my stomach drop. "Someone's been talking to our competitors," he said, dropping the papers on my desk. "Details about the merger leaked. The board's furious." I sank into my chair, my mind racing. Only 5 people had access to those documents, and I trusted my team completely. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that we need to move faster. I want you to fly out tomorrow. Meet with the Singapore team in person. 2 weeks minimum." My phone buzzed. "Ethan." I ignored it. "I'll make it happen," I told Victor. The timing couldn't have been worse, but maybe some distance would help clear my head. When I got home that evening, I found Ethan in the kitchen with Marjorie. They fell silent as soon as I walked in, like teenagers caught plotting something. "Lila, darling." Marjorie's smile never reached her eyes. "I was just telling Ethan about this lovely couples retreat. Perfect timing with your work being so demanding lately." I set my briefcase down harder than necessary. "Actually, I'm flying to Singapore tomorrow. Merger complications." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Ethan's face darkened. "Tomorrow? Were you planning to tell me?" "I just found out myself. It's 2 weeks, maybe 3. Marjorie clicked her tongue. "Oh dear. That's unfortunate timing. Ethan just agreed to let me stay here while my condo gets renovated. But don't worry, I'll take good care of him while you're gone." My head snapped up. "Your condo?" "The one you just spent a fortune renovating last year." "Mold," she said smoothly. "Such a terrible problem in these old buildings." I looked at Ethan, who suddenly seemed very interested in his coffee mug. "And when were you planning to tell me about this arrangement?" I thought, "With you being so busy." He trailed off, avoiding my eyes. I need to pack. I turned and headed upstairs, my hands shaking as I pulled out my suitcase. A few minutes later, I heard Ethan's footsteps behind me. "You're being unfair," he said. "She's my mother. She needs help." I kept folding clothes, not trusting myself to look at him. Like she needed help last Christmas? And the summer before that? There's always some crisis, Ethan. Always some reason she needs to insert herself into our lives. She's lonely since Dad died. It's been 7 years. I spun around. And what about that note she left? Are we just not going to talk about that? What note? The genuine confusion in his voice stopped me cold. I pulled out the paper and handed it to him. His face changed as he read it. This isn't Mom's handwriting," he said slowly. I snatched it back, studying it more carefully. He was right. The cursive was similar, but not identical. Then who? My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. "Enjoying the chaos? There's more where that came from." Someone's playing games," Ethan said, reading over my shoulder. "We should call the police." But something clicked in my mind. The leaked merger documents. The fake note. The sudden appearance of Marjorie. It was too perfect, too coordinated. "I need to make a call," I said, already dialing Naomi's number. "And Ethan? While I'm gone, maybe you should ask your mother about Margaret Evans." His face went pale. Margaret Evans, the woman who'd been CFO at my company before me, who'd mysteriously resigned after a series of personal scandals. The same position I now held. What does Mom have to do with Margaret? I zipped up my suitcase. Ask her. And maybe while you're at it, ask her why she's been having lunch with our biggest competitor's CEO. As I wheeled my suitcase past him, I caught a glimpse of Marjorie watching from the hallway, her face unreadable. But this time, I noticed something I'd missed before, the faint scent of her perfume, exactly like the one in our bedroom days ago. The game was bigger than I'd thought. And I was done playing defense. Singapore was supposed to be my escape, but Marjorie's shadow followed me halfway across the world. I was reviewing merger documents in my hotel room when Naomi's urgent video call came through. "You need to check your joint accounts," she said without preamble. Now, my hands shook as I pulled up our banking app. The numbers didn't make sense at first. There were dozens of recent transfers I didn't recognize. Large ones. "How did you know?" I asked, my throat tight. "Because I just showed $1 million property to your mother-in-law. She's buying it cash, Lila. Said it's going to be a surprise for Ethan." The room started spinning. I checked the transfer dates. They aligned perfectly with my business trips. Times when I was too busy to notice our accounts being drained. My phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Should have paid more attention to the home front. I called Ethan 3 times. Straight to voicemail. Finally, I texted, "Where's the money?" His response came hours later. "Mom's helping us invest in our future. Come home and we can talk about it." I laughed until I felt sick. Our future. Right. The next morning, I headed to the Singapore office early, needing to lose myself in work. Instead, I found an email from Margaret Evans waiting in my inbox. "I saw your name in the merger documents. History repeats itself. Call me if you want to know how this ends." I stared at her number for a long time before dialing. She answered on the first ring. "Let me guess," she said. "Marjorie's moved in? How did you?" Because that's how it started with me too. The concerned mother-in-law, worried about her son's workaholic wife. Then the financial help. Then the rumors. My blood ran cold. What rumors? Check your company email. The anonymous tips about insider trading should be arriving any minute now. As if on cue, my phone lit up with a message from Victor. My office. "Now, we need to discuss some allegations." I ran to the bathroom and threw up. When I got back to my hotel that night, after hours of defending myself to the board, I found an email from our family lawyer. Buried in the attachments was a document with Marjorie's signature, a power of attorney form, dated 3 months ago. Ethan had given her control of our joint assets. I called Naomi again. "I need you to do something for me," I said, my voice steady despite everything. "Find out everything you can about Marjorie's finances from when her husband died. Something's not adding up." "Already on it," she replied. "And Lila? There's something else you should know. I drove by your house today." There's a for sale sign in the yard. I ended the call and opened my laptop. First, I transferred every penny from my personal accounts to a new bank. Then I booked a flight home, not to reconcile, but to fight. My phone buzzed one last time that night. A photo from the unknown number, Marjorie and Ethan at dinner with the CEO of our biggest competitor. The caption read, "Checkmate." But they'd made one crucial mistake. In the background of the photo, partially visible on their table, was a document I recognized, our confidential merger papers. I forwarded the photo to Victor with one line, "Found our leak." Then I started typing an email to our company's legal team. The subject line? Evidence of corporate espionage and financial fraud. Marjorie wanted to play chess? Fine. But she'd forgotten something important. In chess, the queen is the most powerful piece on the board. As I packed my bags for the flight home, I found the original note that had started all this, still tucked in my jacket pocket. Some wives deserve what's coming to them. I smiled for the first time in days. Yes, we do. Just not in the way Marjorie imagined. The corporate espionage investigation moved fast. By the time my flight landed, Victor had already called an emergency board meeting. What I didn't expect was to find Ethan waiting at the airport. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, falling into step beside me. "Mom was trying to protect us." I kept walking. By stealing our money? By selling company secrets. She was protecting our future. The merger would have meant relocating to New York. She found out before you could blindside me with it. I stopped dead in my tracks. The New York position, my dream job, had been confidential. Only the board knew. "How long?" I asked. "How long have you been helping her spy on my company?" His silence was answer enough. My phone buzzed. "Victor, board meeting in 30. Bring everything you have." "And Lila?" "The New York position is still yours if you want it." At the office, security stopped Ethan at the lobby. I watched him argue with them through the glass doors, looking lost in his expensive suit, the one I'd bought him for our anniversary. The boardroom was packed. Victor stood at the head of the table, looking grim. "Mrs. Everett is already here," he said. For a moment, I thought he meant me. Then I saw Marjorie, sitting calmly among the board members, wearing a triumphant smile. "I hope you don't mind," she said sweetly. "I brought some documents of my own to share." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were printouts of emails, my emails, discussing confidential merger details, with dates that matched perfectly with the information leaks. "These were found on my daughter-in-law's personal laptop," Marjorie announced, along with evidence of substantial private trading activity. The room went quiet. I felt the blood drain from my face as I realized her plan. She hadn't just been gathering information. She'd been planting evidence. "That's impossible," I started, but Victor raised his hand. "There's more," he said. "Mrs. Everett has also brought to our attention some concerning wire transfers, which I can explain. To offshore accounts," he finished. Marjorie's smile widened. "I hate to say it, but when I discovered what Lila was doing, I felt morally obligated to come forward. Family loyalty only goes so far." I almost laughed at the irony. Instead, I pulled out my phone and played the recording I'd made in Singapore, Marjorie's voice, clear as day, discussing the merger details with our competitor. "Interesting timing," I said, watching her smile fade, "especially since these conversations happened before any of those emails were supposedly sent from my laptop." I laid out my own evidence. Timestamps proving the emails were backdated, bank records showing the real destination of the missing money, and finally, Margaret Evans' sworn statement about Marjorie's previous corporate sabotage. "You're not the only one who knows how to gather evidence," I told her. "The difference is, mine is real." The board erupted in chaos. As security escorted Marjorie out, she hissed, "You'll regret this. Ethan will never choose you over family." "That's where you're wrong," I replied. "You stopped being his only family the day we married. You just couldn't accept that." Later that night, Victor called to formally offer me the New York position. "The board was impressed by how you handled this," he said. "We need someone like you heading up the East Coast division." I looked out my office window. Ethan was still waiting in the parking lot, sitting in his car. 5 years of marriage, and it had come down to this, a choice between the life I'd built and the life he wanted me to live. My phone buzzed one last time. "Another unknown number. You won this round." But ask yourself, what else are you willing to lose? I deleted the message and picked up my office phone. Victor, I'll take the job. Sometimes protecting yourself means being willing to lose everything. I learned that lesson the hard way. Now it was time to teach it to someone else. I should have known something was wrong when Naomi called to warn me about the cars parked outside our house. It looks like a family reunion, she said. And not the fun kind. I pulled into our driveway to find Ethan's entire family waiting in the living room, aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't seen since our wedding. And there, holding court in my favorite armchair, sat Marjorie. Darling, she said, rising to greet me. We've all been so worried. The room felt like a trap closing in. Family photos had been strategically placed around the room, happy moments from before my career took off. Before I changed, as Marjorie loved to say. What is this? I asked Ethan, who wouldn't meet my eyes. His Aunt Sarah spoke first. We're here because we love you both. But this situation, the accusations against Marjorie, the New York position, the divorce papers you requested, Marjorie added softly, producing a manila envelope from beside her chair. My head snapped toward Ethan. I hadn't requested any divorce papers. I found them in your email drafts, he said quietly. Were you even going to tell me? The draft email. The one I'd written in Singapore during my darkest moment, but never sent. Someone had accessed my personal account again. Show them the email, I said. Show them the actual sent date. Marjorie's smile tightened. The details aren't important. What matters is healing this family. Family? I laughed. Like how you try to frame me for corporate espionage. Or how you drained our accounts. Lila, Ethan warned, but I was done being careful. Tell them, Marjorie. Tell them about Margaret Evans. About the competitor meetings. About how success changed you, she interrupted. About how my son comes home to an empty house while his wife chases promotions? Don't you dare. Show them your phone, she continued. Show them the texts from Victor at all hours. The late-night meetings. The trips. The room grew thick with whispers. I saw the judgment in their eyes, the story already written in their minds. Ethan needs stability, his uncle declared. A real family. And what about what I need? I asked, but my voice was drowned out by a chorus of concerned relatives, all talking about family values and priorities and choices. That's when I saw it, the moving boxes stacked in the hallway, already packed and labeled Ethan's clothes, kitchen, photos. When were you planning to tell me about these? I demanded. Mom found us a place, Ethan said. Just until things settle down. Until you decide what's really important. The room spun. 5 years of marriage, reduced to cardboard boxes and ultimatums. My phone buzzed. Victor again. Need your decision on New York by tomorrow. Team's waiting. I looked around the room, at these people who claimed to love me while systematically dismantling my life. At my husband, who'd rather believe his mother's lies than face the truth. You want me to choose? I said finally. Fine. I'd choose me. I walked to our bedroom, grabbed my emergency bag, the one I'd packed after Singapore, and headed for the door. Lila, wait, Ethan called. We can work this out. I turned back one last time. You know what's funny? I actually thought I was the one waging a war. But this elaborate ambush? This is what real manipulation looks like. Congratulations, Marjorie. You've taught me more about revenge than I ever wanted to learn. Sometimes love means making hard choices, she replied, but I caught the flash of uncertainty in her eyes. No, I said. Love means not forcing someone to choose. As I drove away, my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number. Running away proves everything I said about you. I smiled and typed back, not running. Just getting reinforcements. The war wasn't over. It was just moving to a different battlefield. And this time I'd be ready. 3 weeks into my new life in New York, I came home to find my apartment door unlocked. Inside, Marjorie sat at my kitchen counter. Flipping through a stack of papers I recognized immediately, my private investigator's reports on her past. Fascinating reading, she said, not looking up. Though I'm surprised you missed the most interesting part. I kept my distance, phone ready to call security. How did you get in? Ethan's name is still on the lease application as your emergency contact. Amazing what a concerned mother-in-law story can accomplish. My stomach dropped. I'd been so careful with everything else, but I'd forgotten that one detail. Where is he? I asked. Downstairs, probably still arguing with the doorman. He doesn't know I made a copy of the key. She finally looked up. You've been busy. Digging into my finances, talking to Margaret Evans, even tracking down my late husband's old business partners. You should leave. But we're just getting to the good part. She pulled out a particular document. See, while you were investigating me, I was investigating you. Did you know your father didn't actually abandon your family when you were 12? The room tilted slightly. What are you talking about? He tried to contact you. Multiple times. But your mother. Marjorie smiled. Well, let's just say she had her own ideas about family loyalty. You're lying. She slid an envelope across the counter. Inside were letters, dozens of them in my father's handwriting. All returned unopened. Amazing what you can find in your mother's attic, Marjorie said softly. When she's properly motivated to help protect her daughter from making the same mistakes she did. My hands shook as I read the first letter. It was dated just months after he left, explaining everything, begging to see me. There were birthday cards, graduation congratulations, even a letter from just last year. My mother would never. Help me? You'd be surprised what people will do when they think they're protecting their children from pain. Marjorie stood. You're not so different from her, you know. So convinced you know what's best. So ready to burn everything down in the name of independence. The apartment door opened. Ethan walked in, stopped short when he saw me. You look thin, he said quietly. I couldn't answer. The letters in my hands felt like they weighed 1,000 pounds. I'll give you two a moment, Marjorie said, gathering her things. At the door, she paused. Oh, and Lila? The board meeting tomorrow? Don't bother going. Victor's retirement was announced this morning. His replacement already has someone else in mind for your position. The door clicked shut behind her. Ethan and I stood in silence, 5 feet and an ocean of betrayal between us. Did you know? I finally asked. About my father's letters? Mom told me last week. He looked exhausted. She also told me about the private investigator. The interviews with Dad's old business partners. Were you ever going to tell me you were building a case against my mother? Were you ever going to tell me you helped her access my work emails? He flinched. I was trying to protect you. The New York position, it would have killed us. No, I said. Your mother killed us. And you helped her bury the body. My phone buzzed. Naomi, turn on the news. Now. The financial headlines scrolled across my TV screen. Market manipulation investigation opens at major trading firm, multiple executives named. My name was on the list. Mom said this might happen, Ethan said softly. That's why I came. To warn you. I stared at the letters from my father, at the news headlines, at my husband's familiar stranger's face. Everything I'd built, everything I'd believed in, was crumbling. Get out, I whispered. Lila. Get out. After he left, I sat in my dark apartment, surrounded by the ruins of my carefully constructed life. My phone buzzed one last time, an unknown number. Now you understand. Some things are thicker than water. Some betrayals run in the family. She was right about one thing. This was about family, just not in the way she thought. The annual Everett Family Foundation Gala wasn't my idea. It was Naomi's. It's perfect, she'd said. Marjorie's pet project, all her social circles in one place. And I have something she doesn't expect. That something was currently sitting in my purse, a USB drive containing 30 years of financial records that had taken weeks to compile. Records that showed exactly where her late husband's fortune had really gone. I spotted Marjorie holding court near the stage, resplendent in designer black, playing the grieving mother to a sympathetic audience. Ethan stood beside her, looking uncomfortable in his tuxedo. Ready? Naomi asked, appearing at my elbow. Almost. I checked my phone one last time. The email from my father was still there, sent after I'd finally reached out. Some people mistake control for love. Don't let them win. Marjorie saw me coming. Her smile flickered just slightly. Lila, darling. How brave of you to show up, given everything. I wouldn't miss it, I said. Especially since I'm making the keynote speech. Now the smile vanished completely. I believe there's been a mistake. The board selected me, I finished. Unanimous vote, actually. Something about wanting to hear from the woman who uncovered the biggest financial scandal in the Foundation's history. The color drained from her face. Ethan stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" "Show them," Naomi called out to the tech booth. The presentation screen lit up with financial statements, transfer records, and one particularly damning email chain. "You see," I addressed the now silent room. "While everyone was focused on the supposed market manipulation at my company, they missed the real story. The systematic draining of the Foundation's accounts over the past 7 years. All traced back to one person." Marjorie's hand shook as she reached for her wine glass. "You have no proof." "Actually, I do. Your husband kept records of everything, including your plans to frame him for embezzlement before his convenient heart attack." The glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. "That's why you were so desperate to control Ethan, weren't you?" I continued. "As long as he was Foundation chairman, you could keep hiding the money. Until I started asking questions." "Mom." Ethan's voice cracked. "Is this true?" "Of course not. She's trying to destroy our family. The way you destroyed Margaret Evans?" I pulled out my phone, hit play. Marjorie's voice filled the room. "Either resign quietly, or everyone learns about your son's real father." The crowd erupted in whispers. Ethan staggered back like he'd been hit. 7 years, I said quietly. 7 years of manipulation, lies, and theft, all while playing the grieving widow. "You don't understand," Marjorie hissed. "Everything I did was for family." "No." Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. "Everything you did was for control." Security was already moving through the crowd. But before they reached her, Marjorie straightened her spine, looked me dead in the eye. "You think you've won? That this makes you better than me?" She laughed bitterly. "Look around, dear. You're standing alone. No husband, no family, no. That's where you're wrong." I nodded to the back of the room, where Victor stood with the FBI agents we'd contacted weeks ago. "I'm not alone. I just chose my family more carefully than you did." As they led her away, Ethan caught my arm. "I should have seen it. Should have believed you." "Yes," I said. "You should have." "Can we?" "No." I gently removed his hand. "Some things can't be fixed, but they can be learned from." My phone buzzed one last time, an unknown number. But this time, I deleted it without reading. Some messages didn't need a response. Outside, the city lights sparkled like justice finally served. Naomi was waiting with a bottle of champagne and 2 glasses. "To family," she said, pouring. I smiled, thinking of my father's email. "To choosing our own." 6 months after the gala, I found myself back in our old neighborhood, helping Naomi stage a house for sale. It wasn't just any house. It was Marjorie's. "The irony," Naomi said, arranging flowers in the foyer. "You're literally cleaning up her mess one last time." The place felt smaller than I remembered. Boxes of evidence lined the halls, waiting for the FBI's final sweep. In the living room, family photos still hung crooked on the walls, perfect facades hiding perfect lies. My phone buzzed, a text from my father. "Lunch next week." We were taking small steps, building something new from the ruins of what was lost. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. The doorbell rang. Ethan stood on the porch, looking older somehow, more himself. "I thought I'd find you here," he said. "Mom asked to see you." I hadn't visited Marjorie in prison, hadn't responded to her letters. But something in Ethan's voice made me pause. "She's dying," he said quietly. "Cancer." "She's known for months, even before." Everything. The universe had a twisted sense of humor. At the prison, Marjorie looked small in her gray uniform, her perfectly coiffed hair now stringy and white. When she saw me, she didn't smile. "I suppose you think this is justice," she said. "I didn't come for justice." "No." She laughed weakly. "Then why are you here?" "To understand." She was quiet for a long moment. "When Ethan's father died, I thought I'd lost everything. Power, status, control. It all slipped away. Then I saw you, building your career, taking my son further from me. I couldn't lose again. So you destroyed everything. I protected what was mine." She coughed. "Or thought I was." Funny how fear makes us mistake possession for love. I thought of my father's words in that email. Some people mistake control for love. "Are you happy?" she asked suddenly. "In your new life?" I'm free, I replied. It's not the same thing, but it's better. She nodded slowly. I never told anyone this, but I was like you once. Ambitious. Independent. Then I let fear change me into this. I stood to leave, but she caught my hand. Her skin felt paper thin. The night I left that first note, she whispered, I was going to confess everything. About the foundation, about Ethan's father. I was so tired of the lies. But then I saw how easy it would be to blame you instead. Why tell me this now? Because you won the game I didn't even know I was playing. She released my hand. Don't become me, Lila. Don't let victory turn into vindication. Outside, Ethan waited by his car. You okay? Are you? He shrugged. Getting there. The foundation's recovering. I'm in therapy. Dating someone new. Good, I said and meant it. You know, he added, she kept every article about your successes. Even in prison. I think she admired you in her way. I thought about fear, about control, about the thin line between love and possession. About how revenge can consume you if you let it. Back at Marjorie's house, Naomi was finishing up. Ready to close this chapter? She asked. I looked around one last time. The empty rooms held no more power over me. No more secrets. No more fear. Actually, I said, I think I'll buy it. Naomi stared at me. You're joking. Not to live in, I explained. To turn into a women's business center. Something good should come from all this. Later that night, standing on my New York balcony, I got one final text from an unknown number. You were always stronger than me. Use it wisely. I didn't delete this one. Some messages deserve to be remembered, not for the pain they caused, but for the wisdom they eventually taught. The city lights sparkled below, full of possibilities. I learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage. It's about choice. And sometimes, the hardest choice is choosing yourself. The call came at 3:47 a.m. I remember staring at the red numbers on my bedside clock, trying to make sense of the words coming through my phone. My father's business partner, James, was speaking too fast, his voice cracking. Alara, there's been an accident. Your parents. The police found their car off Mountain Pass Road. I'm so sorry. My name is Alara, and that call marked the moment my carefully constructed world began to crumble. I sat there in the dark, clutching my phone long after James had hung up. The house was quiet except for Griffin's steady breathing beside me. My husband hadn't stirred during the call, and I couldn't bring myself to wake him yet. I needed these few moments alone to process what I'd heard. The police said it was a tragic accident, brake failure on a dangerous road. But my father had always been meticulous about car maintenance. Always. I slipped out of bed and went to the kitchen, my bare feet silent against the cold tiles. The familiar space felt foreign in the pre-dawn darkness. As I reached for a glass of water, my hand trembled so badly I nearly dropped it. Mom? Rowan's voice startled me. My 18-year-old son stood in the doorway, looking younger than usual in his oversized t-shirt. What's wrong? I turned away, buying time by filling my glass. Your grandparents. The words stuck in my throat. There's been an accident. What kind of accident? His voice sharpened with worry. Before I could answer, Griffin appeared behind him. My husband's normally perfect hair was tousled from sleep, but his eyes were alert. Too alert for someone who'd just woken up. What's going on? Griffin asked, though something in his tone made me wonder if he already knew. I told them about the call. As I spoke, Griffin's expression shifted from concern to something else, something calculating. He placed a hand on my shoulder, but his next words made my skin crawl. We should call the lawyer first thing in the morning. Make sure everything's in order with the estate. Rowan shot his father a disgusted look. Really, Dad? That's your first thought? It's practical. Griffin defended himself. Your mother's not thinking clearly right now. Someone needs to handle the business side of things. I shrugged off his hand. My parents are dead, Griffin. They're dead, and you're talking about their money. I'm trying to help, he insisted, but there was an edge to his voice I'd never noticed before. Or maybe I just never wanted to notice it. The rest of that night passed in a blur. I made calls to my sister overseas, to family friends, to the funeral home. Griffin hovered nearby, always listening, always offering to handle things. Each time he spoke about practical matters, something cold settled deeper in my stomach. Around dawn, I found myself alone in my father's study, surrounded by photos of happier times. One caught my eye, my parents at their 40th anniversary party last month. Dad was laughing at something Mom had said, his hand protectively on her back. They looked so alive, so vital. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Need to talk to you alone. Important. Your father left me something to give you. Before I could respond, Griffin appeared in the doorway. The lawyer can see us at 9, he announced. I've already called the insurance company too. Everything will be taken care of. I looked up at my husband of 20 years, really looked at him, and for the first time, I felt like I was seeing a stranger. His smile didn't reach his eyes, and those eyes were fixed on the framed photos of my family's estate. Thank you, I said quietly, but in my mind, I was already making plans to meet James alone. Something wasn't right here, and I needed to find out what my father had wanted me to know. As Griffin left the study, I heard him on the phone, speaking too softly to make out the words. But one thing was becoming clear: the accident that killed my parents might not have been an accident at all. 2 weeks after my parents' funeral, I found myself staring at a wedding invitation. Not just any wedding invitation, my son's. The cream-colored paper trembled in my hands as I read the date. Next weekend. Rowan was getting married next weekend, and he hadn't even told me in person. I found him in the garage, working on his car. The same way my father used to work on his. The thought made my chest tight. Were you planning to tell me? I asked, holding up the invitation. Rowan slid out from under the car, grease smeared across his cheek. His eyes flickered to the paper, then away. Dad said he'd handle it. Of course he did. Griffin had been handling everything lately. Your father doesn't get to handle this, Rowan. You're my son. Why didn't you tell me yourself? He stood up, wiping his hands on a rag. Because I knew you'd try to talk me out of it. You're 18, Rowan. You've known Ivy for what, 3 months? 4, he corrected, as if that made it better. And I love her. The garage door opened and Griffin walked in, followed by a petite girl with long dark hair. Ivy. She smiled sweetly, but something about that smile made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. There you are. Griffin's voice was too cheerful. I was just showing Ivy the property plans. Did you know she has quite an eye for real estate? The property plans? I echoed. For my parents' estate? Griffin waved his hand dismissively. Just thinking ahead. Family planning, you know? We're not even through probate yet. My voice came out sharper than intended. Ivy stepped forward, linking her arm through Rowan's. I hope I'm not causing any trouble. We just want to start our life together, don't we, honey? Rowan nodded, but I caught a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes before he looked away. Why don't we all have dinner together? Griffin suggested. Talk things through like family? An hour later, we sat around our dining room table, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Griffin had ordered expensive takeout, using my parents' credit card, which he somehow had access to now. So, Ivy, I said, watching her push food around her plate. Tell me about your family. Oh, it's just me, she said quickly. My parents. They're not in the picture. That must be hard, I said, noting how she avoided eye contact. Where did you say you went to school? I didn't, she replied, then quickly added, I was homeschooled. Griffin cleared his throat. Ivy's had a difficult past, Alara. Let's not interrogate the poor girl. I'm not interrogating anyone. I'm trying to get to know my future daughter-in-law. Mom, Rowan warned. What about college plans? I pressed. You and Rowan. Actually, Griffin interrupted. I've been talking to Rowan about joining me in the family business. I set down my fork. What family business? You work in sales. Not anymore, Griffin smiled. I've been looking into taking over your father's company. The board seems quite receptive to the idea. The room started spinning. You what? It makes sense, he continued. Keep it in the family. Rowan can learn the ropes, eventually take over. Stop. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Just stop. My father's body isn't even cold, and you're already. Mom. Rowan's voice cracked. Can you not make everything about them? I looked at my son, really looked at him. He seemed smaller somehow, caught between his father's ambition and my grief. But there was something else in his expression, a desperation I couldn't quite understand. Ivy placed her hand over his. Maybe we should go, she said softly. As they stood to leave, I caught a glimpse of her phone screen lighting up with a message. The name, Asher, flashed briefly before she tucked it away. After they left, Griffin approached me with that practiced, concerned expression. You're not thinking clearly, sweetheart. Let me handle things for a while. I stepped back from his reaching hand. You keep saying that, but I'm starting to wonder exactly what you're handling and why. His smile faltered for just a moment, but it was enough. In that split second, I saw something that chilled me to the bone, the same calculating look I'd noticed the night my parents died. I needed answers, and I knew just where to start. Tomorrow, I would meet James and find out what my father had left for me. But first, I needed to know more about this mysterious Asher who was messaging my future daughter-in-law. Meeting James felt like a betrayal, even though Griffin was the one I couldn't trust anymore. I parked 3 blocks from the coffee shop, checking my rearview mirror twice before getting out. Paranoid? Maybe. But after what I'd found this morning, I couldn't be too careful. James was already waiting, his usually immaculate suit wrinkled like he'd slept in it. Dark circles under his eyes matched my own. You look terrible, I said, sliding into the booth. You should see the other guy. He attempted a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Did you bring it? I pulled out my father's letter, found hidden in his desk drawer this morning. Tell me what this means, James. He glanced around before reading it, his face growing paler. The letter was typical dad, straight to the point. If anything happens to your mother and me, don't trust the numbers. Griffin's been cooking the books. Get James to show you the real accounts. Your father suspected something was wrong months ago, James said quietly. The company's finances weren't adding up. Large transfers to offshore accounts, unauthorized investments. In Griffin's name? Shell companies. But we traced them. Your husband's been embezzling for years, Elara. Small amounts at first, then bigger ones. Your father was planning to confront him the day of the accident. My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. The brakes. James nodded grimly. The mechanic who serviced their car the week before disappeared, along with all maintenance records. My phone buzzed. A text from Griffin. Where are you? Important meeting with the board at 2. Need you here. There's more, James said, sliding a USB drive across the table. Your father kept detailed records. But be careful who sees these. Someone at the company is helping Griffin, someone with access to. The coffee shop door chimed. Ivy walked in, arm in arm with a young man I didn't recognize. They were too engrossed in each other to notice us. The way he touched her arm, whispered in her ear, this wasn't just a friendly meeting. Who's that? I whispered to James. Asher Reynolds. Tessa's son. He worked as an intern at the company last summer. The name hit me like a punch to the gut. The same Asher from Ivy's phone. My phone buzzed again. Griffin called Rowan. He says you're not at yoga class like you told him. I need to go, I said, standing abruptly. But James, there's one more thing. Rowan's getting married next weekend. To that girl right there. Tell me what you know about her. James's face went white. Ivy? She's not who she claims to be. She was involved in a fraud case last year, but the charges were dropped when the main witness disappeared. Asher was supposed to testify. Another text. Found your car. Coming to get you. James, I have to. The coffee shop door opened again. Griffin stood there, his charming smile firmly in place, but his eyes were cold as he scanned the room. They landed on me, then shifted to James, and finally to the USB drive still on the table. Darling, he said, walking over. I've been looking everywhere for you. He reached for the drive, but I snatched it first, clutching it in my fist. Griffin, I managed, trying to keep my voice steady. I was just having coffee with an old friend? His smile didn't waver as he gripped my arm. How nice. James, always a pleasure. But if you'll excuse us, my wife and I have a board meeting to attend. As Griffin steered me toward the door, I caught one last glimpse of Ivy and Asher. They were watching us now, their expressions unreadable. But just before we left, I saw Ivy pull out her phone and make a call. In the car, Griffin drove in silence for several minutes before speaking. You know, sweetheart, curiosity can be dangerous, especially when it comes to family matters. I thought of my parents' car, of missing brake records and disappeared witnesses, of my son rushing into marriage with a woman connected to it all. Is that a threat? I asked quietly. He patted my hand, his wedding ring glinting in the sunlight. Of course not. Just a friendly warning. After all, we wouldn't want anything to happen to Rowan, would we? The USB drive felt like it was burning a hole in my pocket. Whatever was on it, whatever truth it revealed, I knew one thing for certain. I was running out of time to save my son. I hadn't spoken to Tessa in nearly 2 years, not since she moved across the country after her divorce. But seeing her number in James's contact list felt like finding a lifeline. I called her from a burner phone I'd bought that morning, sitting in my car 3 towns over from home. She answered on the first ring. I've been waiting for your call. You knew. About Griffin? Honey, I tried to warn you 20 years ago. Her voice softened. But that's not why you're calling now, is it? It's about Asher, I said. And Ivy. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. Finally, Tessa spoke, her voice tight. Where are you? We need to talk in person. An hour later, I sat across from her in a dingy motel room. Tessa hadn't changed much, still fierce, still direct. She pulled out a laptop and opened a file. First, you need to see this. She turned the screen toward me. It showed security camera footage of Griffin meeting with Ivy in a parking garage. The timestamp was from 6 months ago. They knew each other? My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Ivy worked for Griffin last year, under a different name. She was part of his scheme to embezzle from your father's company. When things got hot, she disappeared, along with nearly $2 million. My hands started shaking. And now she's marrying my son. It gets worse. Tessa pulled up another file. Asher was working at your father's company when he discovered the fraud. He was going to testify, but she swallowed hard. Someone threatened his life. My son had to go into hiding, but I just saw him with Ivy at the coffee shop. Because he's trying to get evidence against her and Griffin. They don't know he's my son. He changed his name, his appearance. He's been working undercover, trying to protect. She stopped abruptly as my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Check your email. Now. I opened my email to find a video attachment. The thumbnail showed Rowan, sitting in what looked like a warehouse. My heart stopped. Play it, Tessa said quietly. Rowan's face filled the screen. He looked terrified. Mom, if you're watching this, I'm okay. But you need to stop digging. Please. Just let it go. Sign the company over to Dad like he wants, and everything will be fine. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The video ended. Another text came through. You have 24 hours. The paperwork is on your desk at home. They're using my son to force my hand. My voice cracked. I have to give them what they want. No, Tessa said firmly. That's exactly what they expect. But we have something they don't know about. She reached into her bag and pulled out a familiar-looking USB drive. James gave you a copy? Better. This is the original. What Griffin took from you was a decoy. She smiled grimly. James and I have been working together for months, gathering evidence. We just needed you to wake up and see the truth. My phone buzzed again. Griffin, coming home soon, darling? We need to discuss the company transfer. He's getting desperate, Tessa observed. Men like Griffin get sloppy when they're desperate. I thought of my parents' accident, of Rowan's fear in that video, of all the signs I'd ignored for years. What's our next move? First, you go home. Act normal. Let Griffin think he's won. Tessa's eyes hardened. Meanwhile, Asher will get Rowan out. We have people in place. And then? Then we spring the trap. But Alara, she gripped my hand. Are you ready for what comes next? Because once we start this, there's no going back. Griffin will lose everything. I thought of my father's letter, of James's warnings, of my son's frightened face. Griffin already took everything from me. Now it's my turn. As I drove home, I composed my face into the mask of submission Griffin would expect. Let him think he'd broken me. Let him believe he'd won. But for the first time since my parents died, I felt something other than grief or fear. I felt powerful. And I finally understood, sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it burns everything to the ground. The wedding rehearsal dinner felt like a powder keg waiting to explode. I watched Ivy work the room, her white dress a mockery of innocence as she charmed our family friends. Griffin stood nearby, playing the proud father-in-law perfectly. Too perfectly. Asher was there too, posing as Ivy's childhood friend. Our eyes met across the room, and he gave an imperceptible nod. The signal we'd arranged. He'd found Rowan. Beautiful evening, isn't it? Ivy appeared at my elbow, making me jump. Though I wish we could have held it at the estate. Griffin mentioned it might be possible after the company transfer. My champagne glass trembled slightly. Did he? Oh yes. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. He has such wonderful plans for the company. Rowan's so excited to learn the business from his father. Where's my son, Ivy? Her expression flickered. Probably just running late. You know how boys are. Do I? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Like how you know Asher? The color drained from her face. Before she could respond, Griffin appeared between us. Everything all right here? His hand gripped my arm, warning disguised as affection. My phone buzzed. A text from Tessa. Package secured. Wait for signal. Relief flooded through me. They had Rowan. He was safe. Now for the next part of the plan. Actually, I said, raising my voice slightly. Ivy was just about to explain how she knows Asher Reynolds. The room didn't quite go silent, but the atmosphere shifted. Griffin's fingers dug deeper into my arm. Darling, this isn't the time. It's exactly the time. I pulled away from him. Before we welcome Ivy into our family, maybe she'd like to explain the $2 million she stole from my father's company? Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ivy's sweet facade cracked. You don't know what you're talking about, she hissed. Don't I? Like I don't know about the offshore accounts? The threatened witnesses? My parents break lines. Griffin stepped forward, his charm turning dangerous. Alara, you're upset. Let's discuss this privately. No more private discussions. I turned to face our guests. My husband and his accomplice here murdered my parents. They're holding my son hostage to force me to sign over the company. And I have proof. The room erupted in chaos. Ivy bolted for the door but crashed straight into Asher. Two plainclothes officers emerged from the crowd, moving toward Griffin. But Griffin just laughed. Proof? You mean that USB drive? Check your purse, darling. My blood ran cold. I reached for my bag, but I already knew. The drive was gone. Amazing what a good pickpocket can do, Griffin smirked. And as for Rowan, he pulled out his phone, showing me a live video feed. Our son, still captive, with a timestamp from 2 minutes ago. That's impossible, I whispered. Tessa said. Tessa? Griffin's smile widened. You mean your old friend who's been working for me all along? The one who gave me every detail of your little plan. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. I looked for Asher, but he was gone. The officers had vanished too. You see, darling, Griffin continued, you're not the only one who can set a trap. Now, shall we discuss that company transfer? My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Mom, don't trust Tessa. She's not who you think. But I'm okay. For real this time. Check the kitchen. I backed away from Griffin, my mind racing. The kitchen. Where Asher had been setting up the catering earlier. Where he'd insisted on handling the champagne himself. Actually, I said, lifting my glass, let's have a toast first. To new beginnings. Griffin's smug expression faltered as he watched me raise the champagne to my lips. For the first time, real fear crept into his eyes. What did you do? I smiled, channeling his own cold confidence. You're not the only one who can play games, darling. Now, about those brake lines. The sound of police sirens filled the air outside, and this time, they were real. Griffin lunged for the door, but it was already too late. Everything was about to change, and for once, I was the one in control. The police interrogation room felt colder than it should have. I sat there, staring at my reflection in the two-way mirror, wondering how everything had gone so wrong. Griffin was in custody, but he was still winning. Mrs. Whitman, Detective Morris said, sliding crime scene photos across the table. These were taken at your parents' accident. Notice anything unusual? I looked away. I couldn't bear to see those images again. Your fingerprints were found on the brake line housing, she continued. Care to explain that? That's impossible. My voice cracked. I never. We also found traces of the same champagne you served at the rehearsal dinner in your father's system. The talk screen showed it was laced with a substance that would have impaired his driving. The room started spinning. No, Griffin did this. He confessed? Morris raised an eyebrow. Yes, he did. He confessed that you planned it all. That you were angry about your father's refusal to let you take over the company. That you recruited Ivy to help manipulate your son into marriage as a distraction. That's insane. I stood up so fast my chair clattered backward. Where's Rowan? I need to see my son. Sit down, Mrs. Whitman. Morris's voice hardened. Rowan's with his father. Griffin's been released. Released? The word felt like ash in my mouth. His confession was very compelling, especially with the evidence Tessa provided. A knock at the door interrupted us. Another detective entered, whispering something to Morris. She nodded, then turned back to me. Your lawyer's here. But instead of my attorney, Ivy walked in, wearing an expensive suit and carrying a leather briefcase. She looked nothing like the sweet, innocent girl who'd nearly married my son. Hello, Ilara, she said, sitting down. I'll be representing you today. Like hell you will. Actually, she smiled, I'm your only option. Your assets have been frozen. Griffin's evidence was quite thorough. The only person who can help you now is me. Morris left us alone. As soon as the door closed, Ivy's smile vanished. Here's the deal, she said. Sign these papers transferring your voting rights in the company to Griffin, and all the evidence disappears, including the real footage of what happened that night on Mountain Pass Road. My blood ran cold. What footage? She pulled out her phone, showing me a video. It was dark, grainy, but I could make out my parents' car. And another vehicle, forcing them off the road. Behind the wheel, my stomach lurched, was Tessa. Your friend was very helpful, Ivy said. Though she didn't know the whole plan. Griffin can be very persuasive when he wants something. Where's my son? I demanded. The real Rowan, not whatever decoy you used at the rehearsal. Safe. For now. But that could change, depending on your decision. My hands shook as I reached for the papers. If I sign these, you go to prison for your parents' murder. Griffin gets the company. Rowan stays safe, believing his mother killed his grandparents out of greed. She shrugged. Everyone wins. Except you, of course. I thought of my father's letter, of all the evidence I'd gathered, now twisted and used against me. I thought of Asher, who'd disappeared with the real USB drive. And I thought of Rowan, somewhere out there, probably hating me. Time's running out, Ivy said, checking her watch. The DA is filing charges in an hour. What's it going to be? I picked up the pen, seeing no other choice. But as I pressed it to paper, my phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. Don't sign. Kitchen camera footage uploaded. Check the news. Ivy's phone rang immediately. Her face went pale as she listened. When she hung up, her composure had cracked. What did you do? She whispered. I set down the pen, remembering the hidden camera Asher had installed in the kitchen during the rehearsal dinner. The one that had captured every word of Griffin and Ivy's private conversation about my parents' murder. You know, I said quietly, my father taught me something important about business. Always have a backup plan. Ivy lunged for the door, but it was already opening. This time, real federal agents walked in. And behind them, safe and sound, was Rowan. The game wasn't over yet. But for the first time, I could see a way to win. The federal agents had Griffin cornered in his office at my father's company. Our company. I watched through the glass walls as he paced, still trying to maintain control even as his world crumbled. When I walked in, his smile was as practiced as ever. "Come to gloat, darling?" "No." I set the USB drive on his desk. "I came to understand." His eyes fixed on the drive. "That's not the real one." "It is." The kitchen footage was just a bonus. I sat in my father's chair. "You know what I can't figure out? Why you needed Ivy. You already had everything." "Everything?" He laughed bitterly. "I had your father's contempt. Your family's money hanging over my head. A son who'd rather work in a garage than follow in my footsteps." The door opened. Rowan walked in, followed by Asher. Griffin's composure cracked slightly. "Speaking of following in footsteps," Asher said, "want to tell them about the other companies? The ones before you married Alara." Griffin's face went pale. "You're bluffing." 3 marriages, Asher continued. 3 wealthy families. 3 tragic accidents. But you got sloppy this time. You let Ivy keep records. "Ivy's dead," Griffin snapped. The room went silent. Rowan stepped forward, his hands shaking. "What did you say?" "She knew too much. Threatened to expose everything unless I paid her more. Poor girl, driving so fast on Mountain Pass Road." Griffin's smile returned, colder than ever. Like mother, like son. Always choosing the wrong people to trust. Rowan lunged forward, but Asher caught him. I stayed seated, watching my husband's facade finally crack. "You know what your father told me the night he died?" Griffin's voice shook. "That he was changing his will. Leaving everything to Rowan directly. Cutting us both out. I couldn't let that happen. I deserved." "You deserved what?" I stood slowly. "To kill my parents? To traumatize our son? To murder an innocent girl because she wanted a bigger cut? Innocent?" He scoffed. "She was working with Asher the whole time. They thought they could outplay me. But I'm always 3 steps ahead." "2 steps," Asher corrected. "Ivy's not dead." The office door opened again. Ivy walked in, very much alive, flanked by federal agents. But she wasn't wearing her usual sweet smile. She looked terrified. "Tell them," Asher urged her. "Tell them what really happened that night." Ivy's voice trembled. "I was supposed to get close to Rowan. Help Griffin access the estate after his parents died. But then Asher warned me what happened to Griffin's other wives. Their families. You were never going to let any of us live, I realized. Once you had control of the company." "Business is business," Griffin said flatly. "Nothing personal." "Nothing personal?" Rowan's voice cracked. "You killed my grandparents. Tried to kill Mom. Used me as bait. How is that not personal? I gave you everything." Griffin shouted, his calm finally shattering. "Both of you. And you never appreciated it. Never saw what I could be if you just got out of my way." He reached into his desk drawer. The agents drew their weapons, but I held up my hand. "The gun's not there, Griffin. I removed it this morning, along with the evidence you thought you had against me." I stepped closer. "You want to know your biggest mistake? Thinking you had to become someone else to be worthy. My father would have given you everything if you'd just been honest." "Liar," he whispered, but his hands were shaking. "Check your email," Asher said. "The last message your father-in-law sent before he died. The one you never saw because Ivy intercepted it." Griffin's computer dinged. As he read the message, all color drained from his face. "A partnership," he said quietly. "He was offering me a real place in the family," I finished. "But you couldn't see it. You were too busy planning our deaths." The agents moved in, reading Griffin his rights. As they led him away, he looked back one last time. "I really did love you," he said. "Both of you." "I know," I replied. "That's what makes this tragedy, not just crime." After he was gone, Rowan and I stood in the empty office, surrounded by the wreckage of our family's legacy. But as I looked at my son, I saw something I hadn't noticed before: strength. Not Griffin's false confidence, but something real. Something like hope. 6 months after Griffin's arrest, I stood in my father's office, my office now, watching the sun rise over the city. The trial had ended yesterday. 25 years, no possibility of parole. Justice, they called it. But justice felt hollow when you had to rebuild a life from ashes. A knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. Rowan entered, carrying 2 coffee cups. He'd started working at the company 3 months ago, learning from the ground up like my father had always wanted. "Thought you might need this," he said, setting a cup on my desk. "Long day ahead." "The board meeting?" He nodded. "Ivy's testimony is being presented. Her immunity deal went through." I studied my son's face, searching for signs of the pain that name used to bring. But he seemed calmer now, stronger. "You know," he said, "I found something in Dad's old files yesterday. Want to see it?" He pulled out a worn envelope. Inside was a photograph I'd never seen before, Griffin holding newborn Rowan, looking not at the camera, but at his son with pure, unguarded love. "He wasn't always the monster we know now," Rowan said quietly. "No," I agreed. "But that makes it worse, doesn't it? Knowing he was capable of better." The intercom buzzed. My assistant's voice was hesitant. "Mrs. Whitman? There's someone here to see you." "From the prison." Rowan tensed. "Mom, you don't have to." "It's okay." I squeezed his hand. "I need to do this." The visitor wasn't Griffin. He wasn't allowed visitors yet. It was Tessa. She looked smaller in her prison uniform, all her fierce energy contained now. "You came," she said simply. "You asked." I gestured for her to sit, though I'm not sure why. She placed a manila envelope on my desk. "Because I owe you the truth. The whole truth, not just what came out in court." Inside were letters spanning 20 years, correspondence between Griffin and Tessa, revealing a relationship that started long before I met either of them. "He was my first love," Tessa said, "when he chose you instead." Well, revenge is a patient game. I helped him, guided him, thinking we'd be together once you and your family were gone. I never thought he'd. Her voice cracked. "I never thought he'd actually kill anyone. But he did." My voice was steady. "And you helped him." "Yes." She met my eyes. "And I'll spend the rest of my life paying for it. But there's something else you should know. Something about your father." She pulled out one final letter. As I read it, my hands began to shake. "He knew," I whispered. "All along, he knew what Griffin was planning. The partnership offer, the will change, it was a trap." "Your father was always 3 steps ahead," Tessa said. "He just didn't expect Griffin to move so fast, or me to be so good at erasing evidence." The intercom buzzed again. "Mrs. Whitman? The board is ready." I stood, gathering the letters. "Thank you, Tessa, for finally telling the truth. There's one more thing." She hesitated. "Asher. He's really my nephew, not my son. His parents were Griffin's first victims. I raised him to help me get revenge, but in the end, he chose justice instead. He chose to save your family rather than destroy it." As security led her away, I thought about choices, the ones that destroy us and the ones that save us. About how revenge and justice sometimes wear the same face. Rowan was waiting outside. "Ready?" I looked at my son, seeing echoes of both his father and grandfather in his face. But mostly, I saw himself, someone who'd faced darkness and chosen light. "Almost," I said. "Just need to make one call." I dialed the prison's number, already knowing what I had to do. Because sometimes the hardest part of justice isn't punishment, it's finding the strength to understand why people break in the first place. "Hello," I said when they answered. "I'd like to schedule a visit with Griffin Whitman." Because some stories don't end with justice or revenge. They end with understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest victory of all.